OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
You're very welcome along. It's the penultimate OTB AM of the festive season. So if you're counting down to Christmas, you have 2 more mornings of us discussing what may or may not happen with the pandemic, coronavirus restrictions. But ultimately today, it's going to start with what does Christmas mean to you? For very many people, Christmas Day is just about waiting to go to Leopardstown on the 26th or waiting for that bumper fixture list in the Premier League. This year might be a little bit different, particularly the repercussions in rugby are a little bit grim. And even when I was on here the other morning, we're already getting a little bit worried about what this might entail in terms of the Six Nations. And if you're a League of Ireland fan, the fixtures came out on Monday. Will we be playing to full crowds come the start of the season? All of these things to discuss. We'll have Keith Wood on the show later on to talk about the cancellation in the Stephen's Day rugby game, which was very disappointing, obviously inevitable, but I guess what the repercussions might be for the fixture lists going forward, and should we be a little bit worried about the Six Nations. Shane Hannon, rarely a man who gives the impression that he's really worried about anything. But Shane, you were an angry man on Twitter yesterday.
I was an angry man on Twitter, Johnny. Good morning to you and all the viewers and listeners. Yeah, angry man. Like we spoke before the show started, Johnny. And like sport is and should be based around the fans, I think. And I was kind of just giving out about the fact that yesterday there was news announced. Now, by the way, this news has been a long time coming. So any Formula One fans out there will remember the Belgian Grand Prix, which took place at Spa back at the end of August. And it was a bit of a shit show, let's be honest.
What happened?
Flew over to Belgium. Well, essentially, myself and 3 mates flew over to Belgium, flew over to Brussels, and had a good time for a couple of nights. Then made our way over towards Spa, towards the track. And on the Sunday, I went to the race. It was pissing down rain, as it is in Monaghan here this morning, fairly heavily and incessantly, it has to be said, at the track in Spa. But that's the reason why the Belgian Grand Prix was the one we picked, because essentially the rain adds carnage and a little bit of excitement to the race itself. It's always one of the better races on the Formula One calendar.
Slightly sadistic of you, but nonetheless.
Yeah, we don't want terrible accidents, but it certainly leads to a lot of overtaking and spinning off the track and that sort of thing. And essentially what happened was the race just kept being delayed and delayed and delayed. The start time was pushed back. We managed to see the Formula 3 race in advance of it, so at least there was a little bit of action earlier in the day. But then the cars did their formation lap behind the safety car, going back and forth, testing their wheels, heating the wheels up. And then the race was essentially put off for hours and hours while they waited for a break in the weather, which ultimately never came. The cars were taken out one last time for, I think it was 2 more safety laps behind the safety car, that is. So for a total of, I think it was 4 laps, all behind a safety car. No racing was done whatsoever. An absolute disaster for fans who had paid a lot of money, including myself, to get over there.
And it was your first.
Which, could you have picked a worse Grand Prix? Like, my dad texted me on the day and goes, you couldn't have picked, a historically bad Grand Prix, but at least that was the only perspective that made it interesting was that we picked a historic Grand Prix.
Following the impact of the weather on the Belgian GP on Sunday 29th of August, Formula One and the promoter are working through various options for ticket holders to express our recognition and thanks to them for their dedication and commitment. We will provide further details as soon as possible, as we want to thank the fans for their continued support and passion for Formula One. And this all changed to spectators who attended the Belgian Grand Prix, which was abandoned after 3 laps following the safety car due to heavy rain, will not be refunded the cost of their tickets.
Essentially. So like the first statement you read out there came from Formula One, I think on September 1st, maybe the day after the race. They were fairly quick off the mark and they said, look, in the days after the race, we're going to work out something. So we're all thinking in our heads, okay, they're going to offer you a ticket to either the Belgian Grand Prix next year or any Grand Prix next year, or at least a heavily reduced ticket, or quite likely money back, because a lot of fans felt a little bit peeved that Formula One gave out half points for that race, essentially deciding that the 4 safety car laps meant it was a race, and that Max Verstappen, who had started the race on pole, won the race but got half points. George Russell, who was in second, ended up in second, and that was their excuse to get out of having to pay the fans any money back. Now that angered a lot of fans who were there, who really did not get to see any racing. But the statement the second statement you mentioned yesterday, that they basically say in that statement, they will be given the opportunity, fans, to enter a prize draw to win some special seats at next year's race. A total of 170 seats. I can tell you there were more than 170 of us pissed off fans at the Belgian Grand Prix last year.
Pissed on and pissed off.
Exactly. So they're giving out 20 VIP, 50 gold and 100 silver tickets, plus one F1 TV pass per person, and the chance to attend an exclusive event, quote unquote, on the Thursday before the race. Fans have until the end of January to claim this offer and essentially enter this absolute joke shop of a draw. I was angry on Twitter. I kind of said it's a truly pathetic insult to fans who attended that race. A lot more could have been done. Formula One do a lot of things right in the sport. They've promoted the sport excellently in the last few years, and we've noticed that with the rise in casual fans probably to the sport. But really, the treatment of race-going fans, and I'm not going to sit here, Johnny, and say, oh, I'm a die-hard, die-in-the-world race-going fan. That was my first Grand Prix. I just happened to be very unlucky. But for all the fans who kind of went out of their way to attend, and we're talking at a time now where we know fans are the most important thing in sport. We're talking about fans over Christmas, and a lot of people kind of anxious that Munster and Leinster didn't get to go ahead, probably for good enough reason, I guess, if Omicron keeps rising. But we want fans in stadiums. We want fans enjoying live sport. We want fans watching sport on television and enjoying it as well. But for the actual match-going fans and race-going fans to be treated like that by a sport was abysmal in my view, and something that other sports should not ever take heed of.
I have a kind of a sporting virginity story to rival that. My first Ireland away game, with all the fanfare that would entail, whatever age I was, in my mid-20s, I think it was Trapp's first game, Ireland v Georgia. Actually did stuff in advance for the first time in years and booked flights to Tbilisi, and then Georgia and Russia ended up in a war, so they moved the game to Mainz in Germany. And you'll remember that really sloppy goalkeeping mistake, Glenn Whelan's goal, and a really scruffy win. But I'd booked flights to Georgia, so I was like, well, I've no interest in going to Germany, so I ended up going to Georgia. Nobody on the flight there. Watched it in a bar, and I remember waking up the morning after I arrived in a hotel that was recommended to me by some guy at the airport who was basically asleep and woken up to give me tourist advice. And I started chatting to this guy, and he was a Portuguese photojournalist whose favourite pub was Mulligan's in Poolbeg Street, which happened to be mine at the time. And we've been friendly ever since, but didn't get to the game, and didn't get to an Ireland game for years actually afterwards. We have another bit of news potential news on Erling Haaland. Samuel Luckhurst. Rangnick pushing for United to try and sign Erling Haaland despite intense competition. Now, this would be amazing. Back to the site of where his dad obviously was almost decapitated by Roy Keane and so forth. This would be good. This would be a bit of fun.
Really, really good story. And I love these stories. And to be fair, Samuel Luckhurst is someone with a finger on the pulse for Manchester United. Any United fans will know his stuff in the Manchester Evening News is usually fairly accurate, which makes it exciting for United fans. But it has the scent of again, like the Ronaldo signing last year. The fans have been punished with the whole European Super League thing. Left a bad taste in the mouth for a lot of fans, and clubs owe a lot to the fans, especially the clubs that got themselves involved in that whole mess. But Haaland is an obvious signing. It's not like Ronaldo that maybe was there to appease the fans, maybe was there to stop him from signing for Manchester City. But Haaland is someone who, on paper, absolutely fits Manchester United. His record.
Everyone, doesn't he? He's unbelievably
This
good.
is the point.
Yeah,
exactly. Like he fits everyone. The interesting thing that he has that such close relationship with Rangnick is quite interesting. Luckhurst is saying he's spoken to his father already. Now, you kind of thought Ole Gunnar Solskjaer being at the helm would have given Haaland a bit of reason, the Norwegian link, to certainly join as well, but that never worked out. Solskjaer was never going to be there long term given the way the results were headed. But this is a fascinating one. And you'd have to say, Johnny, I don't know what he's worth in today's market. I know that the release clause, 75 million, becomes active next year. And he will leave Dortmund. Let's be honest; it's just a matter of where he goes to. But United really putting their noses out there if this is true. And Rangnick, look, he's only in charge for 6 months, as we know, and then the consultancy role kicks in. So he'll want a big move that kind of puts him in the good books with United fans after that 6 months.
Yeah, I think any Premier League fan would absolutely love to see that, and maybe the most valuable footballer in the world at the moment, thereabouts. Anyway, Shane, we're kind of hitting on a theme here of disenfranchised sporting fans in this kind of modern era of, I guess, people who don't necessarily go to games, and I guess people who are paying on to watch on TV. It's becoming globalised now, and maybe local fans are being disenfranchised. But the Christmas experience as a sporting fan is quite interesting. As I mentioned at the top of the show, Christmas for a lot of people is about suffering through Christmas Day, probably eating some rather dry turkey and complimenting your parents on the cooking of it, and there we go, and so on and so forth. But then we get into the 26th and the fun begins. You're a very rounded sports fan. What does it mean for you?
Yeah, like Christmas for me and for a lot of sports fans and even people who are casual sports fans just revolves around sport. Like for us, it would always be head to Terry's Bar on Stephen's Day. You're setting up your stall nice and early, Johnny. And I think for a lot of people this year who are
what's the bar?
Feeling safe, Terry's Bar in Monaghan Town. So that's probably the local on Stephen's Day. But you go in, you get your spot nice and early. The pubs, of course, closing up at 8 o'clock this year, so it's going to have to be earlier if anyone's heading in. But you set up your perch, you watch the football all day long, you watch the racing all day long. You might take a trip across to the bookies if a tipple is your fancy. And then there's the Interpros as well. Of course, we were not going to have Munster Leinster this year. There's no Ulster Connacht, which is very disappointing for the sports fans. Interesting to see, and I'm even seeing reports in the paper today, and of course it's only right as well that if the football is cancelled in terms of fan attendance, and the Premier League goes ahead behind closed doors, all of the games will again be shown on television at least, which was of course the case last year for the lockdown when it happened and the games were behind closed doors. But that's Christmas for me, Johnny. You, as you say, you're waiting all Christmas Day for Stephen's Day's sporting nonsense to happen, because I call it nonsense because you're literally finding any and all sports to watch. Like Christmas is darts for me, and darts is Christmas as well. You've got snooker, like the Championship League kind of building up towards the Christmas time, like the World Grand Prix, which just happened, and Ronnie O'Sullivan back to winning ways in that tournament as well. And then in January, one of the Triple Crown events in the Masters is to come with Alexandra Palace in London.
The Ali Pali.
The Ali Pali. Like the sporting awareness at Christmas is huge. You might sit back and watch some old sports films as well, but really it's all about the live sport. It's all about the Interpros. For me, the snooker. For me, the darts. All of the football. And inhaling as much of it as is humanly possible, John. Like, if you had 10 sets of eyeballs, it would be quite handy at Christmas time, because there's no limit where you reach and say that this is too much sport. I think at Christmas, for even the most basic of sports fan, you can't watch too much sport at Christmas.
Yeah.
What about yourself?
I do miss the League of Ireland games around this time of year, because when they moved to the summer schedule, which I was totally in favour of, and I think has been a success, and I'm still in favour of it, but I do miss Stevens' Day / Boxing Day. I call it the 26th. I do miss going to games that day. And up north,
you're not like Kevin Gilban, no?
What's that?
You're not like Kevin Gilban calling it Stephen's Day live on BBC. You're more of a you stay on the fence.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not really a religious person. So I think the Stephen's Day stuff is kind of a little bit. I was mad though for going around on the bike as a youngster as well. Following the money for the RAN and all that, which was a bit of crack as well. But no, I used to love going to League of Ireland games, and up the north now you'd be a bit envious. That they have their Boxing Day fixtures, as they call it, with the Linfield are playing Glentoran. Going to do a piece this week with Chris Shields, because he's up playing for Linfield now, and I think the games are on the 27th this year because it being Northern Ireland, it being a Sunday, they can't play games up there on the Sunday. But I do miss that aspect too. But you are a polished kind of anachronism in a Monaghan accent. You have an extremely wide range of sports, including darts, that you're interested in, and it's all about Ali Pali for many people this year. I was just talking to you before the show, presuming it was going ahead behind closed doors, what with restrictions and so forth, and let's be honest, it'll be a bit of a spreader event as sporting events go, but it's going ahead as normal.
It is going ahead as normal. It is almost like a super spreader event when you see the images on television. You do wonder and question yourself, but then again, England have kind of done things differently. The UK has done things slightly differently to all different sports. Like, interesting you mentioned there as well. I saw the quotes from Kevin Gilban talking to one of the shows there with us in the last week or so, talking about the fact that, as a footballer, you never get to actually celebrate Christmas. Like, while he was a professional footballer, you're not celebrating Christmas because you have those games, as you mentioned, on Stephen's Day or the 27th or what it might be. You don't get to have your little Bailey's coffee at Christmas. You don't get to pig out in your mad dinners because you're probably training on Christmas Day. Let's be honest. It must be tough for footballers, and that's another good point. Like darts players, I mean, they don't get their Christmas, although technically, diet nutrition has never been something that's been a strong point with darts players, to be fair. So I'm sure they enjoy themselves regardless, as long as they don't have a game. Do you watch the darts, Johnny, or are you a man who will sit back and relax and enjoy it, or are you a man who just completely avoids the whole thing?
No, in fairness though, like various Christmases I did enjoy it, especially like if you it's not a bad thing to have a small bet on as well if you're that way inclined over the Christmas. And in fairness, there's always that debate, is darts a sport? And we were talking about the pre-show about the quality of the 180, but I think in terms of mental fortitude and that, now, back in the day, I mean, you were probably, your mental fortitude was probably as you were getting tanked up drinking while he's playing at the tournament. I think that day is kind of gone, and in fairness, like, it is quite gripping, and it's kind of a bit of a laddish thing to watch, like a lot of, like, tanked up lads kind of shouting and roaring and singing songs and, having a bit of crack, but like, as a spectacle, it's far from the worst.
Yeah, and like I know Jerry Gilroy, who's normally presenting this very show, calls it Brexit down the pub, but he's got a point. I know where he's coming from, but it's definitely in terms of difficulty. Like anyone who's ever tried to throw darts at a dartboard in a pub or in their gaff knows exactly how difficult it is. Not an easy sport, as you said. Mental fortitude that it requires. Quite serious. Like, yeah, it is quite a laddie. That there is that culture about the whole sport. There's no doubt about it. Fallon Sherrock has done a lot in the sport in recent years to kind of change that attitude and become the first woman to win at Alexandra Palace in a World Championship match a couple of years ago. Really has put a face in the map. She's probably the most well-known darts player in the world right now, aside from Michael van Gerwen and Van Barneveld and Gerwyn Price and these guys. She's up there in the top 5 without a shadow of a doubt for what she has done.
And actually, if we were to have a virtual insanity type answer for the darts here from the boy Hannon, who are you tipping up to win it this year?
It's hard to look past Michael van Gerwen for me. Like, Gerwyn Price won it very impressively last year for the first time. But I remember speaking to Michael van Gerwen a couple of years ago, interviewed him on Off the Ball, and he's a lovely lad. Always over in Ireland doing exhibitions as well. I think he used to be a plumber when he was younger, and once worked on Dennis Bergkamp's toilet, if I'm not mistaken, as a Dutchman. He ended up one day. I don't know what the exact scenario was that found himself in that position, but Holland must be a small country. But Johnny, will I go through, so this is something I was planning on doing in this morning's show, and for anyone sitting on the fence, the top 5 reasons why we love the darts. So for anyone kind of tuning in who's a darts fan, you don't really need convincing as to why you watch the darts and why you love the darts.
Get up this early in the morning?
Maybe not. Maybe they're still celebrating from last night's matches. But I know we have a couple of darts fans in the Off the Ball parish. I know Richie McCormick and Phil Egan and others are quite there are
a lot of weirdos in Off the Ball. They're just interested in all these obscure sports and able to talk about it as well.
Yeah, well, this is it. We cover a lot of bases, Johnny. But I'll run through a couple of the reasons, right? So these are the top 5 reasons why we love the darts. I'll run through them very quickly. So anyone can play it. So we had Florian Hempel, Johnny. That's a name you might not have heard, but he defeated a German player, Martin Schindler, 3-0 in the first round on Sunday evening. But that might not.
Schindler's list of woes must have been the headline, obviously.
Absolutely perfect. I was waiting for you to say it.
There we go.
But it was his debut. But the really interesting thing was he only took up darts 4 years ago. So he started in a flat in Cologne. Had a week's vacation. He said he started playing a little in his flat, ordered a board. On Friday, he went to a tournament and won the tournament. That's 4 years ago. And again last night, Johnny, he knocks out Dimitri van den Berg. So van den Berg is one of the top players of the tournament. Hempel played unbelievable, a brilliant 11-dart leg against the 5th seed and against the throw in to take the first set. Never looked back, wins by 3 sets to 1. So that's one of the reasons you can take up darts and win a couple of games of the World Championship in 4 years' time if you want. We've got Irish interest as well. Johnny Keane Barry, unfortunately, knocked out the young 19-year-old Meath thrower. But a really, really great future in the game for him. We've got Carlos Steve Lennon taking on Mervyn King, a big name for sure in the best of 7 sets, 3rd round. Daryl Gurney is another who's already beaten Ricky Evans by 3 sets to 1, and he's got a big name in the next round. It's either going to be Rob Cross, the 2018 world champion, or the 5-time champion Raymond van Barneveld. You've got Willie O'Connor as well from Limerick, who plays Glenn Durant this afternoon, actually, in round 2. And then Brendan Dolan from Enniskillen, one of the well-known names as well. 23rd seed, plays Callan Rids from England tomorrow. And Johnny, I just want to bring people a couple of quick video clips that kind of highlight the fans and the impact that the fans have on the sport.
Darts is nothing without the fans.
It's nothing without the fans. The first
nothing
video
without the
here,
booze either, really, is it? I mean, if darts were an event where it was like a prohibition era event, would anyone go to it?
This is the issue. Like it was behind closed doors
players,
in the tournament last year. Yeah, it's a weird sport behind closed doors. It doesn't really make sense. You can do all the fake crowd noises you want all day long, but without that live atmosphere, it's nothing. This first video, Johnny, that I wanted to bring people, a very short one. Boris Johnson, we know he's lost the dressing room in the UK at the minute. He's lost the fans at the darts as well. Have a look and a close listen to the chant at the darts the other day.
So stand up if you hate Boris, was it?
Stand up if you hate Boris. There was also a sign being held up by one of the fans in the background. This is a business meeting, which I thought was very tongue-in-cheek. So that's excellent. I mean, stand up if you hate Boris. That's it. He's lost the fans, Johnny. He's lost the fans at the darts.
That is pretty class. Carl Mullaney's just come in and brought me, because I'm a bit of an invalid at the moment, he's brought me a coffee, which is just a sign of the man, really. And he will shortly be here for the news round with Shane. Any other reasons to love the darts?
Yeah, there's one other very short video, Johnny, I wanted to bring people, and people will have seen this. So 9-dart finish is quite amazing, and there's often the discussion, where does it rank in terms of sporting individual achievements? Like, people often compare it to the 147 in snooker. I think possibly the 147 is slightly more skilled. It's quite more, it's quite rare as well. We don't see 147s at the World Snooker Championship too often. We had one last year, and I think previous one was 2012, Stephen Hendry, so there was a nice gap. But without a doubt, the 9-dart finish is something to behold. And that we had the one with the Scottish player, Willie Borland, the young guy, hit a 9-dart finish in a deciding leg on December 17th, 5 days ago, to reach the second round. The first darts player in history to ever win a televised match with a 9-dart leg, which was really, really incredible. And then the Lithuanian thrower as well, Darius Labanauskas, a second 9-darter within 24 hours before he was sent packing in the very same game by Mike de Decker on Saturday afternoon. But the crowd goes into ruptures. World Championships that have featured multiple 9-dart legs, 2013, 2014, and now this year's World Darts Championship. So it's a rare enough thing to get a couple. 6, though, of the 12 9-darters hit at Alexandra Palace have been in losing causes. So you can still hit a 9-darter and lose. But there's this great video, Johnny. I mentioned how amazing the 9-dart finish is. So the gentleman in the crowd here in this video certainly enjoyed seeing one 9-darter in person the other day. This video is courtesy of Sky Sports' Emma Payton on Twitter. So have a quick look. So, I mean,
I don't think he did that for, the way, like, social media is so dominant now and phones are everywhere that you do stuff like that and imply that it's kind of organic, but you're being filmed. I don't think that was the case here.
It seemed, now, he's either the best actor in the world or he did it remarkably well. He seemed...
the stoicism out of him, like, this kind of like, I'm going to do this. I mean, it reflects the severity of what's happened here.
Exactly. And like, for people listening in a podcast who didn't get to see that clip, essentially he watches the 9-darter, sees it in person. He's obviously had a couple of lagers across the day, you'd imagine, as you tend to do with the darts. He takes off his hat, first of all, which I should point out. So he was concerned about what might happen to his hat, and then pours an entire pint of lager over his head, covering his clothes. So clearly concerned about the hat and absolutely nothing else. But I think that little moment, and you always catch things in the crowd at the darts that just make you laugh and just, you want to see these things in person. There's also a clip, Johnny. I want to bring people this clip because just to finish up on the darts, showboating players. I love when players are cocky in any sport, no matter what it is, are confident about themselves. But there's a match the other day. Boris Koltsov, he's a Russian. He's entered the hearts and minds of darts fans the world over. So he's playing in the first round this week in London, won his first round match, managed to send the crowd into hysterics as he did so. So essentially, he had missed a few match darts. This is the context, Johnny. And then he has these 3 darts in hand to win the match. And the crowd are geeing him up. They're kind of starting to boo. And he is just smirking. He's smirking, getting the crowd on his side, loving the attention that he's getting. This is a clip here as Koltsov closes out Jermaine Watamena, the number 37 player in the world. Have a listen.
Boris Koltsov has missed 4 darts to win. Now the crowd getting involved.
think he likes it.
He smiled there like a Bond villain. He's smiling now like a winner of the World Championship. Russian royalty at the Ali Pali. Go on, Boris.
That music
on,
has
Boris.
just gotten me going there, just right there.
Yeah, I mean,
Shane, you've run way over the time here in the darts. It's supposed to be like a 90-second discussion that you've turned into about 15 minutes at this stage.
Yeah, Johnny's Tommy, producer's texting me here, telling me to essentially shut up, which I will do. But Johnny, that's why I love the darts. I couldn't stop talking there. Apologies, guys.
Yeah, for Shane Hannon this morning is no score. Yeah, that'll be. What's that event that goes on in January? Is it the one that's not as good? The BDO.
The BDOs, yeah, the BDO World Championship. So we used to have the BDO, it became the PDC. Like, of those 5 World Championships that I mentioned, that Raymond van Barneveld has won, like 4 of them were BDO, and 1 of them has been PDC. That's because the BDO used to be the main dog in town. Now it's absolutely atrocious. I've said before, I could probably enter the BDO myself and win a match, which is an exaggeration.
And well, you might. Thank you, Shane.
Cheers, Johnny.
OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning, or certainly it was anyway until Shane started talking about darts. Good mornings. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Coming up on the show today, we have loads coming up. Starting off here with Cathal Mullaney with the sport. Cathal, we also have a little book to talk about.
Yeah, I think so.
Do you want to start with that or the sport?
We'll start with the sport, shall we? It's a bit more important, I would say. You've recapped, of course, on all the football action. More action tonight in the Carabao Cup with Chelsea taking on Brentford, Liverpool against Leicester and Tottenham against West Ham. That, of course, in the quarter-finals. Last night, Arsenal impressed in a 5-1 win over League One promotion hopeful Sunderland to book their place in the last 4. The Scottish Premiership fixtures tonight, they're likely to be the last to be played in front of large crowds for at least the next few weeks. That's because capacities are to be capped at 500 from St Stephen's Day. That's in a bid to prevent a rise in COVID-19 Omicron cases. After winning the League Cup on Sunday, Celtic aim to close to within 4 points of league leaders Rangers with the win at St Mirren. Elsewhere, Sean Maloney takes charge of Hibs for the first time. They host Aberdeen and the bottom 2 face each other when Ross County travel to St Johnstone. Shall we go back to the darts? Willie O'Connor is in second round action this afternoon at the World Darts Championship. He goes up against Glenn Durant at the Alexandra Palace. Among the matches in the evening session, Kim Huybrechts against Steve Beaton. And a big evening ahead for the Irish cricketers. Their historic tour of the United States gets underway. It's the first time a full member nation has played an entire series on US soil. The teams play the first of 2 T20 internationals in Florida. Play due to get underway there at about 7 o'clock Irish time. Not sure if you spotted the interesting story, I'm sure you did, Johnny, in the papers this morning about Jim McGuinness possibly linking up with the Waterford hurlers.
Indeed, yeah. Jim's been quite rounded, obviously, with his Gaelic football, obviously best known for, but he's been heavily involved with Derry City underage as well, having been involved with Celtic, so he's nothing if not rounded. Yeah,
interesting this one. Performance coach type role, the Irish Independent report with the Waterford hurlers as part of their backroom team. As you say, Johnny's been linked with a number of jobs on the football front. In Gaelic football, the new Down football management team, he was linked with a role there with Conor Laverty and Marty Clark, but it didn't come to pass, and he stated at that stage that it was his intention to continue to work in soccer. I'm not quite sure how this role will interfere with that, but it does seem like he's set on staying in soccer. Possibly if a League of Ireland role came up that would suit him, you get the sense that he might take it.
Yeah, I think with Damien Duff coming into the league was brilliant. I'd love Roy Keane to get like the Cork City job in time. I think Colin Healy will do a very good job and all that. But yeah, the good names have to go back to it though. You mentioned the darts. Are you a fan of the darts?
Oh, I am a fan of the darts.
Are you a fan of the darts?
Yeah, myself and Will were on about this yesterday morning as well.
Will as well. He's another.
It's part of Christmas. It's part of Christmas. I think the final that hooked me was Barney against Taylor. I think Barney won that one. It was a very dramatic final. Probably back in the mid-noughties now at this stage.
Look at Shane Hannon smiling there on the screen. He's just
Shane remembers that final, I'm sure.
Do you,
oh
Shane?
yeah, Jesus, lads. There's just been some classic games over the years that take you right back. But as Cal mentioned, like, and I've said it before, darts is Christmas.
I know. I mean, so like, granted, like we've moved virtually overnight from being like an uber religious, like, you know, country to basically a secular country. Now we're saying darts is Christmas.
Yeah, like I wouldn't be a religious man, Johnny, but I probably pray to the darts gods at Christmas time. That's my darts is my religion.
Seriously unwell, Shane. You are seriously unwell.
Yeah, not well. Like Cal's one of the darts kingpins in the office as well. We have a few lads who are
I wouldn't say
big
that,
time into it.
You remember Shane as well. Remember Brendan Dolan's 9 darter in Dublin?
Oh.
Double in, double out. Incredible, yeah, incredible.
Like just to see some of the clips, even like I remember, I don't remember it, I wasn't alive, but Paul Lim's 9 darter, the first televised 9 darter, I think, at the World Championships, and you hear the commentary and losing their heads about it. And there's nothing better, lads. I know it comes to the 3 Arena, I think, every now and again, the darts for
I've been
the World
actually.
Grand Prix events. You've been, Johnny.
Yeah.
You've been.
I only had I don't know what was going on, but I only had 2 beers, and like it was really apparent that, you know, you can't just go to this and have 2 beers, because everything got so out of hand that it just descended into this kind of like drunken mess. And I was kind of like, you know, looking down on these people, like basically all but throwing booze at me at the end of the night. But I was just thinking, right, so you're on Twitter there this morning. You've probably like referenced the Belgian GP and your kind of vitriol or whatever, and they might then have a look at your like Twitter feed, and they're going to see like an off the ball clip of you basically saying like, Christmas is darts is Christmas, and they'd be just like, I don't think we need to worry about this lad. Like they'd be like, you know, it's like local man yells at crowd after this, like at crowd even.
I just look like someone who just yells at whatever sport is taking his fancy that day. Like on our call this morning, I know the lads mentioned yesterday the whole Drive to Survive carry on with Formula 1 and how much it's increased interest in darts. And I think yesterday Colin Buhig was talking about just hypothesizing as to what.
Did you say Drive to Survive has increased interest in darts? You just said that.
Sorry, no. Sorry, if I said that, I apologise. I did not mean to say that.
On the brain.
It's darts on the brain. It's increased interest in Formula 1, no end. I know yesterday they were kind of hypothesizing as to what a tennis Drive to Survive version might look like, but Emma Carroll of Off the Ball mentioned our own on our call this morning what a darts Drive to Survive version. I don't know what you'd call it. It wouldn't be Drive to Survive for sure. It'd be something else. But that would be a fly on the wall darts documentary, following them around during the World Championship.
Can we please get some entries into the best name for the darts?
I think we were actually on about this in the office. Off the ball to off the bull, or on the bull.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, lads, another interesting one? What would your my favourite nickname in darts is probably, there's a guy called Frosty the Throwman.
Yeah.
This is Emma Carroll suggesting, by the way, the Flying Arrows as the name for the show. What's your nickname, lads, and what's your walk-on music?
Walk-on has to
put you on
be
the spot there.
Vincent van der Voort's walk-on.
Which is that one again?
Na Vincent van der Voort. That's my attempt at that.
And then I think he's asking though if you were a darts player, Carl.
Yeah, what's yours, Carl?
Oh God, I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It's a tough one now.
Yeah,
might go for a bit of John Hopkins or something, but yeah.
Yeah, but some of the walk-ons are brilliant.
90s trance.
You mentioned the BDO as well, Shane. Remember Ted Hankey? Yeah, the Count.
Dracula.
The Count. Yeah.
The names are brilliant.
Yeah.
Chizzy Rascal.
Yeah. Like some of the nicknames, lads. The walk-on music needs to be recognisable. It needs to be something that the crowd can sing along to, or else it needs to be filthy, trancey, deep house music that people can just lose their heads to, I think. It's a tough one, though. I'm sure people have their opinions.
Just to remind you, it's the penultimate Off the Ball before Christmas, after which the darts begins. What else going on, Cathal? Well, we really need to move away from this.
Yeah,
Do we need to move away from it?
Well, back to this. I want to know more about this Sligo book, Johnny. I want to know more about this book.
We're getting into that in about 4 minutes. Because what age are you, Cathal, bringing out a book already?
I'm 27.
27. What have you done at 27,
25.
Shane Hannon?
Nothing, just gone to a failed Formula 1 Grand Prix and not written any books.
Rained off. Yeah. It rains a lot in Sligo, to be fair.
It does rain a lot in Sligo, yeah. In terms of some other stories, interesting one actually from Connacht GA, that they've confirmed that Golden Score will be used to decide FBD League matches that end in a draw after Christmas. That competition gets underway in early January and will be held in the indoor dome at the province's Centre of Excellence near Ballyhonus. The throw-in times have been brought forward as well to 6 o'clock in the evening for those matches. So Golden Score to decide matches sounds interesting.
Of course, there wouldn't be that many close games in Connacht because of the way the Gaelic Games is like.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, I suppose at that time of year it's going to be interesting. I know Sligo play Leitrim, which should be an interesting one. Andy Moran's first game. I'm not sure. I'd go with Mayo on the other side and Roscommon involved as well. But that should be an interesting competition in the indoor dome. Some breaking news as well from Manchester United this morning that we should mention. They're looking to add to their coaching staff, further names to their coaching staff, and the name that has emerged is Ewan Sharp to become assistant coach and analyst. He has been involved with Ralph Rangnick before at Lokomotiv Moscow. And he was also involved at Toronto FC as a coach. So it looks like he's going to be added to the Manchester United coaching ticket under Ralph Rangnick. So he's boosting his background team there with that this morning. And no official confirmation as yet, but reported by Sky Sports this morning that Ewan Sharp set to become part of the coaching ticket at Old Trafford.
What else we got?
Well, that's the soccer news this morning, and also some news as well on the rugby front, of course, from yesterday, that the United Rugby Championship match between Leinster and Munster postponed on St Stephen's Day. That's due to COVID issues in the Leinster squad, which also led to the cancellation of their game against Montpellier in the Heineken Champions Cup last week. Dates will be considered to play a refixture of the United Rugby Championship match. Leinster set to resume training next Tuesday, and they're due to face Ulster on New Year's Day. So let's hope that everything is going to be okay there in terms of the COVID cases, and they can get back on the field. And Nicola Sturgeon, just to refer to that Scottish story again as well, says that sport will be effectively spectator free for the next 3 weeks. That's because the capacities are limited to 500. So you'd worry probably that's Wales now that's gone behind closed doors yesterday, and Scotland now to 500. So I wonder, is it just a matter of time before the Premier League heads down the same route?
I couldn't believe the Welsh national of an event I've been at behind closed doors. I mean, it's like Chepstow's a vast racecourse, and I don't know, I have my views on this, but your book, tell us about it.
Yeah, okay.
Game of my life. There we have it on screen.
Yeah, Sligo Game of My Life. Yeah, so it's part of a series by Hero Books. That's a company run by Liam Hayes, the former Meath footballer and journalist in his own right for many years. So it's 30 Sligo players talking about a game that stood out for them in their career. So there's a whole series of books on the different counties out at the moment.
Can we see the cover again? I think this is a little bit controversial. Now, I might be wrong, but is Paul Taylor there?
Yeah, that's Paul Taylor
on the right.
Yeah,
that's him. Perfect.
Yeah.
I actually wouldn't recognise him there.
Yeah, Paul Taylor, one of the top forwards that Sligo's produced in recent memory.
In my time growing up, he was Declan Darcy was the Leitrim goat or whatever, and Paul Taylor was just brilliant footballer. Yeah,
and he managed Sligo there in recent years as well. So there's 30 Sligo footballers in it on a game that stood out for them in their careers. So there's a nice mix of different memories and stuff dating back from 1960 up to the present day. So that was the rationale of the book. And
how long did it take you?
It took probably 6 to 8 months early this year. So a lot of it was done over Zoom, because if we go back to this time last year, remember the COVID situation wasn't great as well, so it was lockdown. So a lot of interviews over Zoom and stuff, but it's all in the players' own words. So they described that the game that stood out for them, and I guess you get an insight into the mindset of Sligo footballers over the different generations and also the different games that stood out for them. Championship League, there's some other matches in there as well, but it tends to be kind of the big Connacht Championship games that take the main focus of the players, or the big games against Mayo and Galway that they managed to get over the line in. Some of them remember games that they lost as well, that were defining moments in their career, narrow losses in Connacht finals and stuff like that tend to stick in the mind. So I have to say it was very enjoyable.
When was Sligo's last Connacht Championship win? The 50s or something like that, was it?
To win a Connacht Championship title.
The 70s was it?
To win the title? 2007.
Oh, but sorry, before that, yeah.
Oh, before that, 1975, yeah.
1975. I remember 2007. I remember actually being working in Setanta at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Galway were. But it's just a shame that football has gotten to the stage now where something like that is just absolutely fanciful, you think.
Yeah, like Sligo last were in the Connacht final in 2015, got heavily beaten by Mayo that day, and since then I suppose they haven't really laid a glove on the bigger teams in the province. But Sligo have a very proud tradition in Connacht in terms of putting it up to Galway, Mayo and Roscommon. I suppose Galway and Mayo would always have another eye probably further down the line in terms of All-Ireland titles and stuff like that. But if you go back to the 60s and 70s, and some of the guys are included in the book from that era, Sligo were really, really competitive at that time, playing in Division 1 of the National League. And of course the championship was knockout at that stage, so there was a lot of draws and stuff and late scores from Galway and Mayo that just pipped Sligo and they weren't able to get through. I think if you go back to that time, a lot of the players would say, quietly anyway at least, that had Sligo got out of Connacht they might have given the All-Ireland a fair rattle, but they just couldn't get over the line on enough occasions around the late 60s and early 70s when Mickey Cairns, Sligo's greatest ever footballer, was really in his pomp. And then if you fast forward then as well to around the late 90s, when you mentioned Paul Taylor, when Paul Taylor was playing Eamon O'Hara, and players like that were really in their prime in the late 90s and early 90s, Sligo were really, really competitive at that stage as well.
And just briefly, I don't know, Paul Pádraig Mannion, who's from my neck of the woods, he was the hurling manager last I know. But Sligo town seems to be more like effectively a soccer town, because maybe Sligo Rovers had so much success. So is it like that as a Sligo GAA fan, like Gaelic football fan, or is it like divided loyalties?
Yeah, to an extent, I suppose. The way I would look at it is Sligo is a very diverse sporting landscape across a fairly thin population. So you have Sligo Rovers, as you mentioned, who have a presence in the town, but they're also well supported from the county and the general region. You know, even if you go into Mayo, Donegal, Leitrim, Roscommon, all that region would support Sligo Rovers. But you've also got other sports to think. You got rugby. Sligo Rugby Club are doing really well. Golf is a big thing. Some really good golf courses in the area. Swimming, Mona McSharry, stuff like that. Athletics, Keelan Kilrehel did really well last week. So there's a lot of talented sports people in Sligo, but the football has a great tradition, and GA has a great tradition in Sligo. As I say, haven't got over the line in terms of titles, unfortunately, 3 Connacht titles, but I think we do have a proud tradition in terms of punching above our weight, if you like.
It's hard to believe 2007 is 14 and a half years ago now.
Yeah.
And Mona McSharry, unbelievable stuff in the Middle East this week, what she was achieving, and I guess Sligo's favourite daughter now anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I think if the Mount Rushmore series was to be done again, Mona McSharry would certainly be in contention, I think, to go up on Ben Bulbin.
Can we just very briefly get the book up on screen again? And this is Cahill's book, Game of My Life, which I think I love these books, because I think the players, they love to kind of go back in time as well and think they were playing again and talk about those memories that have maybe faded with time. Up next, we're going to talk rugby with Keith Wood.
Santa's coming to town. Oh my God! Santa here? I know him.
Let it snow, let it snow. You're listening to OTB Sports Radio.
Football Pod with Paddy and Andy, our new weekly Gaelic football show with Paddy Andrews and Andy Moran.
All that has happened is people have come in here, right, listened to the pod for the last 29 episodes and seen the lifestyle that Paddy Andrews has had. He's wearing a Roddy Collins jacket, he's got his teeth done like Ross from Friends. He is looking he's looking magnificent, and he's ready to go.
Just for the pod, lads.
Just for the pod.
Download the OTB Sports app and subscribe to the GAA podcast feed now.
Car insurance is boring, but you don't have to be. Get Set Go is the kind of car insurance you can sort in a few minutes online, then bounce on with your day. Are you ready for Quick Start Insurance? Get a quote now at getsetgo.ie. MCL Insurance Services Ireland Limited, trading as getsetgo.ie, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Yeah, we're now joined by Keith Wood. Keith, I don't know if you've been listening to the show, but the only place to start on this beautiful morning is, are you a fan of the darts?
I'm not a fan of the darts.
What?
No, and I know that sounds ludicrous, because everybody seems to be. I haven't been watching telly recently, so it's I'm out of the loop is the easiest way to put it, lads.
I've actually gotten kind of used now to, in the evening, putting on Off the Ball or Lyric FM or something like that. I'm gone off the TV as well. What's it with you, Woody? Is it like just you're doing different stuff, or?
Yeah, different stuff, and I'm often working fairly late. So one of our clients is in the States, so we'd have calls that are fairly late in the evening. So that kind of, I think, makes a mess of it. And then at that stage, I'm a bit tired. I'm trying to put something stupid on maybe on Netflix or something I've seen before, so that I'm not thinking too much at night time, so I can get a decent night's sleep.
Shane Hannon, any reaction to Woody on the darts?
No, it's a fair point. It's like Marmite. It's like Marmite, to be fair. And Woody makes a good point. I mean, a lot of us don't have the time to be sitting down watching television anymore. Like, I haven't watched as much of the darts as I would have liked. So, no, that's a fair point. There's only so many sports we can watch, Johnny, to be fair.
Yeah, and one of them is not going to be rugby, unfortunately, on the 26th, Woody.
No, which look, is very disappointing from a whole variety of different reasons. And of course, the reason that it has to be off is because guys have COVID, and I think it's causing carnage again. And it's very hard for, it's funny, we were talking a few weeks ago about Munster down in and getting stuck down in South Africa, and how unbelievably hard that is when you're tested every day all the time. You have to be so careful with every single thing, and then we seem to have a new variant at the moment that's far more transmissible, and it just means it looks like we have to reevaluate how we're doing different things. I think it's very, very tough for them, for the players on that side. From Munster's perspective, it's it's kind of great that it's postponed, but this was a big bumper day for Munster and has been, and they haven't had it for the last couple of years. And sport's suffering quite heavily financially at the moment. It was very interesting during the week listening to Pat Lam having a discussion that if COVID continues to flourish and fans aren't in, that there is a risk to the sport in itself. And he's talking about one of the wealthiest backers in the game behind Bristol, and yet he still is saying this is nerve-wracking for everybody because the money has been kind of leached out of the game because of COVID. So I think it's very tough. It's a very tough time for sport in general, actually.
Just on that, like, and because the restrictions, I've had very, very mixed views and restrictions nearly all along, and sometimes I've been probably very wrong on it. But is there any evidence whatever that going to an outdoor event like Thomond Park or whatever, or Lansdowne Road, is actually a spreader? Like, so is there a case sometimes that I found that the sporting bodies are so kind of beholden to the government that they just don't seem to say anything about these things?
Yeah, I mean, you're asking me, and I'm not going to take the exact same line as the governing bodies, but I won't be far off it. For me, I think you do have to get to the point where you trust public health and what they're actually saying, because it isn't just for maybe the people that may get infected, but it's for the impact that puts on the health system, and is our health system able to take much more of it? And it isn't really. So I think we do have to protect elements of that. I do think outside seems to have been, in the last period of time, safe enough. But I do think there's a high level of fear. And, a lot of the conversations I'm having, there's a high level of fear at the present moment in time in terms of the transmissibility of this variant. And they don't know enough. So I think having a conservative nature is, in my view, is the right thing to do. And because we don't know enough yet. And with each change that happens, the decisions are made. Yes, it puts people under pressure and economically under pressure and a whole variety of other things under pressure. But this is a unique experience, and it isn't as if it's just Ireland that's dealing with it. It's the world that's dealing with it. They're all dealing with it in different ways. None of them seem to be getting ahead of it over anybody else. So, look, I don't know. I think for me, you have to trust public health, because they have to get the balance right with it. And I think at times it's opened too early and closed too early. But what do we know? So I think in a lot of cases, there's huge reaction to different things. There's emotional reactions, because there should be an emotional reaction. But we don't have all the facts. And there's people having to make decisions that impact on us. And I don't know that it's easy for any of them. And I think it's just a terrible position that we're in. And we're all totally fatigued by it, because we just say, well, all we're going to do is get out of the bloody thing, and let life go on as normal, whatever normal is, or whatever new normal is.
Can't remember anymore.
Yeah, well, exactly. So I don't know, I would still be saying get out into the countryside as much as you possibly can and get as much recreational exercise as you can, because that's the only thing that'll keep the spirits up at this time of the year.
It's a fair point, Keith, and like you mentioned Pat Lam's comments, and interesting to see him talk about the Premier League decision to keep sport going over the Christmas and New Year is an important one for rugby as well. Like when you look at this decision, and even over the weekend we had, of course, the news I think emerged on Saturday that Leinster were looking to appeal the punishment that came their way, having not been able to field a team in that Champions Cup game against Montpellier. Like, I know Jerry Thornley was on with us this week, and he was kind of saying he doesn't expect that the Leinster appeal will be successful. But what do you make of that? Because as you said, like, this is affecting all teams everywhere in every sport, COVID at the minute, and Omicron. What did you make of this idea and the likelihood possibly that Leinster's appeal won't be successful and that they will in fact be punished for what happened last week?
Yeah, I look again, because we don't know all the detail in relation to it. And of course, there's always rumour and counter rumour that happens when everything like this happens. But we don't know all the facts on it. As it looked from the outside, Leinster were able to field a team that Irish Public Health said was okay. And so the objection I'd have to the fact that Leinster got a 28-0 result put against them was it just was totally out of kilter with what had happened the previous week with Wasps when players pulled out the morning of the game. It just doesn't make any sense. You're looking for consistency in relation to it. So with that, without having full access to all the information, you're looking at it from the outside and you'd say, well, that doesn't seem particularly fair. And if it isn't fair, well, then they have a case to argue against it, especially when 24 hours later, the French government pulled every French team out of it. So if it had been delayed a day or the match was on a day later, they wouldn't have had a 28-0 against them. So that just shows you how bloody awkward it is. I mean, and I have sympathy for the organisers, because this changes not every day. This changes every hour at certain times, and the pressure that they're put under is colossal. And again, we're trying to say that this is unique. So the reaction for this has to be some level of balance to try and figure out a way to see if you can get that game back on the cards, unless there's more information there that we don't know about.
And surely, like this Six Nations, I don't know, has there been a Six Nations with such going for it in terms of the quality of the top sort of teams? But surely there's not going to be. Are we going to be anyway fearful that this will be somewhat behind closed doors? Will there be repercussions in February?
I'd be fearful of it, I have to say, at this stage, at this remove. The numbers in the UK are fairly colossal. They're up at 95,000 cases a day, which is it's a huge number. So you have that on one side. You have a fair element of restrictions of travel still. People are saying that it's difficult. I mean, I had a few flights this year. I normally fly a huge amount. I didn't fly at all for about 15 months, and I've only had a few. It's awkward enough, I have to say, and it's not something I'm jumping up and down to do all the time. I think there will be restrictions, but I don't think it'll be behind closed doors. I think there'll be a limited number in there. That's guesswork entirely at this stage, because you just don't know. But it has a huge impact. And I can tell you that, yes, there was some decent rugby behind closed doors, but actually the vast majority of it wasn't decent. You need the supporters. Like, the reason this show exists is because of supporters of sport. You need people in there shouting, getting emotional, the great rivalries. And I can tell you as a former player that the energy that comes from the crowd is often the determining factor of whether you can win or not. You're feeding off that energy. Without it, it's harder. Now, we've seen brilliant rugby in the last few months. I mean, really, really exciting and interesting. It's almost like a reawakening of the sport. And I think if we go behind closed doors again, that could put a little bit of a stall in that.
Keith, another story that's kind of it got us talking a lot in the last week is, of course, Johan van Graan's impending departure to Bath. And I was really interested to hear Brian Kerr at the weekend talking about Stephen O'Donnell heading from St Pat's to Dundalk, and the kind of his surprise at that sort of exit, and talking about loyalty and that sort of thing. And I'm not trying to compare the two, but certainly surprise exits always get us talking in sport. But what's your take on how this has all played out in the last week or two with Johan van Graan and his impending departure to Bath?
Yeah, I think loyalty is one of those great things. It's one of the great discussion points, and there's nothing that annoys fans more than an apparent lack of loyalty. So I do think that that's one of the really interesting ones. I'd also put a point that loyalty is a two-way street. You can't be loyal one way. So a lot of times guys leave clubs and the fans bemoan the fact that they've left, but they've left because they didn't feel the club was showing them enough love or whatever it was. In Van Graan's case, or in coaches' cases, I think it's slightly different. I think all coaches have to buy into the idea of developing a team and a squad in a province and leaving something afterwards. That's what they will always say, and that's what they always have to say. The practical reality of an awful lot of it is that they're counted on their results on the field and on the time that they're there. And so the long-going loyalty is probably the wrong word to use. You want them to be unbelievably professional, actually. And the loyalty thing is I have to say, probably secondary, because most coaches don't stay in a place for very long, 3, 4, 5 years, maybe tops. So they're going to move somewhere else and they're going to show their loyalty somewhere else. So, look, we talked about the Van Gran bit. For me, I'm just still bewildered by the fact you can have a break clause. With 6 months, it's very hard to build a team and a club and a future around having your main coach having a 6 month break clause.
Just on that, Keith, like that's a big issue as well in League of Ireland with players now, but it's far more understandable because obviously they want to, progress to a higher level. But what was the thinking there in terms of Munster allowing that to be there in the first place from your remove?
Well, it's not Munster, it's the IRFU.
The IRFU, rather, sorry.
They're IRFU contracts, and he's an IRFU employee. So the head guys in all the provinces, so the head coach, I think the head doctor, head physio, are all IRFU employees, not the provincial employees. So I think it's to give them the space out of it. And so it's a two-way break clause, so everybody can break with 6 months' notice. And for me, I know a coach mightn't work out well and you might want to get rid of him, but that means you have to go down to the level of succession planning that you're doing, your interview process and actually getting the coach. But too often we seem to be reacting to having to get a coach in 6 months as opposed to building up that succession planning. And for me, I think it's to do with that contract. And if a guy wants to get out of his contract, he's going to have to buy his way out of his contract. And at least you're not in a bad position in that circumstance if you have a 2 or 3 year contract. So if you're building something out and you have someone there for 2 years, that's fantastic. If it's up and out, I think that puts a huge pressure on it. I think it's one of the difficulties in sport, actually. If the head man carries the can for a huge amount of how the province goes about its work. So, yeah, and Munster have had an awful lot of variability with that. There's been a lot of changes of coaches in the last 7 or 8 years, 8 or 9 years. So, Munster are looking for stability. So, for me, having a 6 month break kind of takes away from that stability. We had obviously Ronan O'Gara giving his views on who the next head coach might be, and obviously Declan Kidney's been linked with the role. The last kind of list I saw would have had Prendergast and Rowntree as the top two, maybe most likely. But with regards to who gets the job, Keith, what's sort of the upside and downside to taking over Munster? You've already referenced some of it there in terms of the contractual situation, but whoever replaces Van Gran, what's he thinking? Well, look, I think I'm going to just change that slightly, and I will answer it, but I think the remit of the job has to be incredibly well defined, and I think it has to be defined along the ideas that this will be, and this is my view, not anybody else's, but that it will be about the promotion of players from within, so from within the Munster system, and then looking to try and get additional marquee players or whatever to support that. But they can't be marquee players that, in my view, go off and play for other countries. I think they need to be retired international players, because you need to get the best out of them for the 12 months of the year, not just for periods of time, because coming back from internationals is very tiring. And actually one of the elements that we have with Ireland is that a lot of the players from the provinces go and play for Ireland, so they're always going to be tired, and they're incredibly well managed. So that is a big plus and a minus for a coach coming in, because he doesn't get to pick his players all the time. And that's dictated to by the IRFU when those players need to have a rest. So that is one of the negative elements. The plus is there's an incredible support, and it is a great stadium. There's a great history. They're underachieving in the point that they're not winning trophies, and the expectation from every Munster fan is that they'll win something. That's, when you're underachieving, the only thing, if you can get that to improve, well, life becomes an awful lot easier for a new coach. So it's a very big mark in the game, and but it needs to be, I think, for a coach, it needs to be something that is not just what they do in the 3 or 4 years. Is there an element of legacy that's built in? So, and I talked about the remit for the coach, but also to the structure for Munster. Do they do something else? Do they use this as an opportunity to turbocharge the schools and the clubs? Because people often complain about, and it is a complaint about what Leinster have in their private school system. It misses the point a little bit. There's no point looking over the hedge and saying they've got a great over there. Munster have an incredibly robust club and schools game. It's just not that fully well coordinated. It needs to be organised a bit differently. It can't be the same as Leinster. It has to be done differently. So that really needs to be addressed. If that gets addressed, you'll get more players being drip fed into the Munster team, but also in 3 and 5 and 7 years' time, you'll have another core of players coming through, and that has to be essential. So, for Munster to buy its way out of trouble, I don't know that that's necessarily the thing that has to happen. And actually, I think there'd be more patience if you could see a lot of the youth getting a chance, and you can see the reaction when. Because of COVID, when rafts of young players have had to go in and play in the squad, the reaction of the fans has been pretty phenomenal. And the reaction of the players has been pretty decent too.
Yeah, really, that's really fascinating to touch on, Keith, because when you talk about the club and the fans and the stadium and the Munster way and all that sort of stuff, and much has been kind of discussed about this need for maybe Munster to get away from the traditional quote-unquote Munster values and a certain way of playing. And I used to hate listening to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer give interviews as Manchester United manager after games where they lost, talking about the Man United way and playing football a certain type of way. Do you think Munster need a certain type of way of playing? Is this a perfect opportunity to kind of move away from that? Or, is too much made of this quote unquote Munster way?
I think there's a lot made of it that's wrong, and there's a lot made of it that's right. If I go back, and it's very important, I think at times we seem to forget as if the provinces were always the be all and end all. They weren't, right? So, I played. There was in 1998. There was 500 people turned up to the Leinster Munster match. Right?
Incredible, isn't it?
Right. So that's it. And in 1992, Gary Owen played Shannon in Thomond Park, and there was anything from 14 to 17,000 people at it, because there was more people climbing over the walls. And, it was crazy. And so that was a huge game. It was a huge time. It was viewed very differently. You played 3 or 4 games for Munster in a year. They had a style, because that was the style that was a kind of decent blend of Cork and Limerick for the most part. But I look back at Munster in the whole 2000s, right? And I played for 1 season with them, and I played a couple of matches with them before the World Cup in 2003. But in that period of time, if you said, what is the Munster way of playing? And if you hear people saying it's up the jumper, it was not up the jumper. It was a blend of forwards and backs. It wasn't Leinster. Leinster were far fancier, far more pace and skill, I'm going to say skill, but in that kind of pure skill. I would have said Munster were a more natural skill, and we weren't as fit as Leinster, and definitely not as fit as Ulster, and that was kind of the way it was. So what I would say about the Munster way is the Munster way should be about its closeness to its supporters, it's the values and behaviours of the club. That's what the Munster way has to be, not the way they play. They don't have a particular way of playing. And in the last few years, we've had a way of playing because of the laws of the game, which meant kicking was absolutely at a premium from about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, absolutely at a premium. If you box kick the ball, you had a great chance of getting it back. That has changed now, and we have not changed with it. And so that's the elements that needs to change. But it has to be exciting as well. It just has to be. There's if we go back to the very start that you asked me about, did I watch darts? There are so many sports that are available for people to watch. It has to be exciting.
You mentioned the kicking, because I'm in and out with rugby. I was really struck by how much Leicester, and as a consequence, Connacht kicked the ball on Sunday. But just a couple of questions before you go, Keith. Declan Kidney, obviously, have to ask you about that, the link with Munster again.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. And I think he's given himself a great chance to be put into a really good structure. And London Irish is a very good structure, and an awful lot of things that are new and are going with them. And I think Declan is a man who'd like to see his things through. Now, I haven't spoken to him about it, but I also think it has to be a big build for the future. And I do think that there's an opportunity for people to get back involved in Munster once they've gone away. I don't think you should be closing the door to anybody. But whether that's a head coach or a director of rugby or a head of rugby or a consultant for rugby or whatever it is, I don't know. But like when we're looking at who's the head coach, I'm absolutely racking my brain for it. And there's not, like, Munster will get one and they'll get a good one, but they also need to get somebody that's more involved, who effectively holds the keys to Munster rugby. You need to have somebody there with a long-term vision, in my view, because it's been reactive for a lot of years now. So what is the plan? What is the sustainable plan? What's the plan for having a proper succession plan for players and coaches? So that doesn't exist.
Shane?
Yeah. Like, as well, Keith, like, even talking about Munster at the weekend, and there's been a bit of negativity around the game against Cast, regardless of the result. And I know Van Gran has kind of come out and spoken about the need to get more game time into the legs of the likes of Simon Zebo and Mike Healy, who haven't played since mid-October. But I'm wondering, look, you see a lot of aimless kicking from that Munster team at the weekend as well. Like, is it tough for a player to get themselves G'd up when they know a head coach is leaving like this mid-season, or is that being a bit facetious about the whole thing? Like, will that have an impact on the players' psychology at this point of the season?
I would always say no, but I'm often wrong on that one. It never bothered me. The coach is going, right, he's going next. You know, you should be a little bit heartless about these things. And you really need to be playing at the highest standard you can to make a really good impression on who the next coach will be. But I don't know whether that's putting them under pressure. I still feel at times we revert to slowing the game down and kicking it too much. So is the criticism for the game last week. Cast won 1 in 27 games away. They kind of turned up to play in their way. They weren't looking to do an awful lot. And you thought by them kicking out on the full, they didn't even bother going for more. They were happy with the 1 point that they got there. They thought that was a huge success. I don't know. I thought it was a very, very flat game of rugby and hard to watch and not the most enjoyable. Now, Munster won. So, you don't want to argue against that all the time, but you do know if it was an isolated incident, you'd say Liverpool winning ugly. Yeah, fantastic. And you'll take it, but they often don't. They often win with aplomb. And so I think as a one-off, you'll accept it. It's not a one-off, so you'll say, yeah, that's not exciting enough. And that was a lot of people in the ground and a lot of people, not overly excited by it.
Finally, Keith, Ultan Delan leaving Connacht, 122 appearances. Obviously, they were involved in that really, really good game on Sunday. Came back with a losing bonus point at least. What does this mean to them?
I think it's a huge loss for them, and I think it is. I think it's a great move for him. I don't know where he's going. I think they were saying La Rochelle.
That's the rumour, yeah.
That's the rumour, and so the opportunity to go and play overseas is a great opportunity and a huge opportunity. And I think he has come around to the idea that he doesn't really feature in Ireland's plans. And that this is the opportunity for him to go and experience a different way of playing, a different way of living, earn more money, I presume, and have a new life experience. So he's given 10 years to Connacht, which is a huge period of time. So I think he should be wished farewell, and I actually think we'll see him again in a few years' time because he's young enough, and he might end out playing a couple of years back here. But I think it's, that's a natural step for somebody who has still ambitions to experience life.
And no new life experience of darts for you?
Sorry, I missed that.
No new life experience of the darts for you?
No, absolutely not. No. Well, do you know what? I never say never. I'm quite happy to watch it. I need to drag my sons in to see if they'll get excited, and I'll get excited with them. That might work.
Thanks a million, Keith.
Cheers, gents. Great to talk to you. Have a lovely Christmas, and to all our listeners.
Same to yourself, and thanks a million to Keith. Great stuff there on Munster, and unfortunately the potential for maybe behind closed doors rugby in the Six Nations. Now let's hear from Stewie Byrne, who was talking about probably the most, I suppose, talked about incident since the League of Ireland campaign ended, the move of Stephen O'Donnell to his beloved Dundalk.
I think it's the wrong decision, but I mean, it's pure emotion, Joe. I think he's like, I've a lot of time for Stephen, I have to say, a lot of time for Brian as well. And Brian obviously is a big Pats fan. And I agree with Brian. I do think loyalty is very important in the game. Probably more important as a manager than it is as a player. And that's why I'm kind of focusing on this from a manager's point of view. Players come and go, I mean, Roy Keane famously said, like, you're just a piece of meat, and you are, to be quite honest, you're expendable. But I just think as a manager, it's important for your career that you're seen to be, how would I put it, stable, consistent, dependable. Loyal, you can say loyal. I mean, loyalty in football, I'm not too sure, to be quite honest with you. But all of the above, what I just mentioned, I think it's important in a managerial career. And I just feel, I was quite surprised when I heard it. Look, I wasn't overly shocked when I heard it either. You can never be shocked in football anymore. You really can't, to be quite honest with you. And because it was Dundalk, Joe, I think he's very, very emotionally attached to Dundalk, because the best years of his career were there. But the best years of his career were there as a player. He's a manager now, and he's gone back to a club that's in a bit of rag order. They've got a lot of stuff to do. They got to get themselves back on the horse again. They've had an awful time of it in quite a short period of time. It's very difficult to turn a football club around after going through a difficult period the way they have, despite the fact that they were so successful for such a long period. But I looking at it from the outside, looking at it, I would, if I would have had the ability to advise Stevie, I would have told him to stick at it for another year.
Yeah, I didn't expect Brian Kerr to come out with the anger that he produced on Sunday when I asked him about that. It was just before a Liverpool Spurs game, but Brian, obviously very passionate St. Pat's fan, and that story just will not go away. But meanwhile, Stephen O'Donnell making loads of very interesting signings at Dundalk this year, and one ex-Dundalk player features in the back of the Indo today, Jamie McGrath. McGrath in line for New Year move away from St Mirren, and that's Jamie McGrath in an interview with Aidan Fitzmaurice speaking about Stephen Kenny's Ireland. His first couple of starts, the nadir of 1-0 down against Andorra and so forth. Really interesting article there. Rory O'Connor, Leinster shut down HQ as COVID, claims Munster clash, and we have some stuff then on the Premier League and so forth, also to do with COVID. Beautiful little photo on the front as well. Wonder will they be watching the darts? Probably not. What have we got in the Herald? Shane Hannon. Will they be watching the darts, Shane?
Everybody should be anyway.
Everybody should be.
That's a fact.
I just think Keith Wood actually might end up watching the darts now because of his off the ball experience this morning. Shane Hannon told me to do it. Here's the Herald. Celtic seek winter circuit breaker, pressure mounts on Premier League. Scottish clubs ask Chiefs for time to tackle outbreaks. More stuff obviously then from Rory. just get your view on this one, Shane. We probably haven't mentioned Mona McSharry enough. She is doing unbelievable stuff for Ireland in swimming. But this is the Irish Times. Gordon Darcy. This is a big headline piece. We should take the opportunity that exists to genuinely revolutionise rugby in Ireland. And obviously a lot of stuff, a lot of friction in the women's game at the moment, Shane.
Yeah, really interesting. And I know they met with the Minister, Jack Chambers, as well, and they have more meetings. I think that one might have been over Zoom. They have more meetings in the new year. Very interesting piece from Gordon Darcy. He makes a few good points. I think he references the fact as well that Germany had a root and branch review into their soccer, setups after Euro 2000. And of course that led on to them leading to a bit more success, I think, in club football and in international football with Germany. And that is essentially what Gordon Darcy is saying, that, look, we need a root and branch review of Irish rugby on all levels, the women's front, the club front, and everything needs looked at, and anything that needs fixed now. And it's a fair point. And it's surprising, Johnny, that it's we're nearly in 2022, and the Irish women's issues are only now really coming to a proper head. And we've had the letter, of course, signed by 50 or 60 odd current and ex-players. The fact that it's taken to this point for them to get the recognition and respect that they deserve is quite worrying, I think, to say the least.
There were two things I said this Sunday, two things that strike me on this. I imagine it's not that easy to get young girls into rugby when there are so many alternative sports that are there for them. But secondly, I got the impression that the IRFU didn't really think it was that big of a deal, and they were taken aback. This organisation, as mentioned Sunday, that's rarely criticised compared to the FEI back in the day. They were taken aback and quite arrogant, really, when they were called on about this.
Yeah, and I think the point is you have to listen to the players. Like, if the women's team, current and former, are coming out and saying these things need changed, A, B, and C need changed, then the IRFU need to just shut up and change A, B, and C. Like, there's no confusion, there's no doubt, there's no meeting halfway. There's no other way to do it. If the players want change, which they clearly do, if they've gone to the ministers and gone to as high as the government, then you have to listen to them. You have to go and adopt change where you can. They're not, this would have been seen as a last resort. They wouldn't have come to this decision lightly to come up with this letter and send it off to government. But the fact that they've had to go this far, I think, suggests how serious an issue it is. And yeah, the IRFU reaction was not good, but hopefully in the new year, when these meetings continue, something will come to fruition with all of that.
Yeah, and women in sport, I think, was it 6 from the 8 that could have won the RT Gong were women this year. It's been an incredible year for women in sport, one of whom obviously was Rachel Blackmore. Now, she features just on the back of the Times London edition, National Treasure, which... bear in mind that this is a British paper, is just a lovely thing to see. Rachel Blackmore on her big breakthrough for for female riders. And obviously Rachel Blackmore kind of broke the mould in that we didn't really have female jumps riders in recent years, but now we have Rachel Blackmore, Bryony Frost, Bridget Andrews. So this is proper changing sport for women by just being exceptionally good. Klopp giving Tierney again. I mean, okay, it's only a referee. I don't know, Shane. The poor Tierney boy, he got a little bit of vitriol from the normally so cool German Jurgen on Sunday, I thought Jurgen can let the old guard down at times.
Like, I'm a big fan of Jurgen Klopp. I really like him.
How would you not
ordinarily
be?
Like, yeah, exactly. Like, and he comes out and says, he speaks his mind on vaccines. He's not afraid to get involved in social issues and political issues and speak his mind on certain things. So for journalists like us, it's quite nice to see a manager being that open. But he does, and I want to say this in a careful way, he does let himself down the odd time when he and it's been
when
oftentimes.
They don't win.
Exactly, but it's oftentimes draws against teams like United and Chelsea and City, and it's maybe points he got where he possibly felt his team should have got more, and Spurs 2-2 at the weekend was one of those. Going up to the referee and comments after a match, you need to leave it out. and remember that referees are human beings as well.
I
They
thought
don't
it was
get
quite
everything
poor
right.
form. I thought it was. We will have a massive problem in this country and beyond to encourage people to referee. It's really, really difficult, and I'm not sure the whole VAR situation helps it being particularly attractive at the top level, where a lot of their stuff has been taken away. Now there's been a bit of a change this season, but I don't think that helps at all. I think you can maybe have your words after with the referee in private afterwards, whatever. But I don't think that sets a good agenda, because Liverpool fans probably think he did nothing wrong.
Yeah, and did I see at the weekend, was it Alan Kelly, the Irish League of Ireland referee, who's been around for some length of time, and I know he's a second generation, a third generation
Top
possibly.
referee.
Top
Patty's
referee.
dad, top referee.
Yeah, like, and when you see the career that Alan Kelly had, and people forget that is a career. Do you know, some people, they decide that playing isn't for them, or for one reason or another, stop playing the sport and get into officiating. And the vitriol they get and the hate they get from all quarters, social media and otherwise, you see there could be Irish kids or teenagers looking at that game the weekend, listening to Jurgen Klopp's comments, who maybe want to become a referee, whose dream maybe isn't to be a footballer and it's to become an official, to become a referee in soccer or Gaelic or whatever it might be. And you see someone who you respect, like Jurgen Klopp, a Liverpool manager, coming out and saying things about a referee. Is that going to encourage you to get into refereeing? Is that going to encourage you to enter something that maybe you love, that you want to get into officiating and not play yourself? It did, as you say, Johnny, left a sour taste in the mouth. I think Miguel Delaney said something similar during the week on Off the Ball, that it just left sour grapes, and he often has sour grapes sometimes, Jurgen Klopp, after games. So I think from that point of view, Jurgen, maybe in the heat of the moment, I understand, can say certain things. After a match, it's tough to tell a manager to quieten down and step back and analyse the situation before speaking about a referee, but it certainly left a sour taste in the mouth.
The other thing is, this is entirely benign compared to some of the stuff that has been revealed about Irish football referees in recent times. And if we think about, scenarios like the Montpellier-Mylock game in Gaelic football this year, you really need to be talking about this in the context of, if I were the referee there, and if you're a footballer who's one of the 30 players in the pitch and you have a 5 out of 10, day, people don't really take much notice. Referees are entitled to have bad days as well as the rest of us. It's just, if we continue to have this narrative where it's kind of okay to do this, people will not referee. Simple as that, because it doesn't actually pay that well in the first place for all the abuse that you will get from time to time. In the Star, in the call, he basically said we're not doing a COVID/vaccine chat, Shane. We were basically voted out of talking about the vac off. Tuchel says non-jab stars must not be vaccinated, because I do think that the Tuchel Klopp kind of difference of opinion here was actually interesting, but Endo was having none of it.
No, having none of it. And to be fair, we all are COVID out. We're vaccinated out. It's all we talk about. But certainly interesting comments from Thomas Tuchel. I was surprised to read those, given the backlash, I think, against unvaccinated players and what that means for a team in terms of the extra length of time. These guys are on stupid money, and if they're unvaccinated and they end up missing longer, because obviously the isolation period is longer if you're unvaccinated as a footballer. Surprised to read Thomas Tuchel's comments. He's entitled to his view, of course, and very interesting that he takes the opposite slant of Jurgen Klopp, for sure.
Yeah, I'm with Klopp on this one. Eddie lights up Cup with a Christmas tree in the mirror, and obviously Nketiah with the hat-trick last night. Briefly, the Sun, see you in January. The Aubameyang situation, obviously, at Arsenal. See you in court. The Conte Conference League stuff, which is just something even quite bizarre that I don't think we were expecting this time of year. Spurs basically attempting to stay in the Conference League, which Irish clubs tried to get into the group stages of, but ultimately failed this year. We'll be talking to Richie Forristal not in about 20 minutes about the Freddie Tylicki case. This is massive stuff for racing. Freddie Tylicki obviously paralysed from a fall on the all-weather, and the ramifications of his case and the judgment against Graham Gibbons. And on the front, the Examiner Blue leader, just want to mention this, Watford set to appoint former Shell's boss Morris. Ian Morris, a very, very high profile, likely appointment for Watford, and grabbing an opportunity, Sean Kelly, on the proposal that could save Gaelic football. Sean Kelly, obviously the former president of the GEA. Aidan O'Mahony joined Joe last night to talk about his new book Unbroken, and here he is chatting about one of the toughest players that he has faced.
04 All-Ireland winner, 06 All-Ireland winner again after that Tyrone defeat the year before, man of the match, few points in the final, marked to Kieran MacDonald, and 07 All-Ireland winner again, All-Star. So on the outside, that looks like you're incredibly comfortable and this is all coming very easily, but it was very striking again reading the book. you know, plenty of doubt, plenty of like, am I going to keep my place? Where do I fit in at this level? And, you know, you're going to be marking Stephen O'Neill in the All-Ireland final against Tyrone, and lots of doubts as well. So on the outside, it kind of looked like you took to this seamlessly, whereas there was a lot of kicking under the water. Now, you kind of got away with it, but a lot of kicking under the water.
Absolutely, yeah. Like, and you said it there, I think a lot of it's where you come from. A lot of it was myself. It was that kind of person I was. I was a total introvert, and I have no problem saying it. You know, my personality, as you said there about media and stuff, trying to interview me was like, I'd say, trying to get blood out of a turnip. And, you know, because you're always afraid you'd say the wrong thing. And it was different with football as well, where I had in my mindset going into All-Ireland finals where you don't want to be the person to let down the team. And it was only when I was writing the book, you were looking back, and you spoke about 2005 and getting that, you know, that honour to mark Stephen O'Neill. Like, that was I suppose, Jack giving me the opportunity, or putting that kind of fortune in me to say, look, we trust you so much, we'll put you on Stephen O'Neill. And it was only when I was writing the book I saw those things. But when you're playing, it was always my mindset that I didn't want to be someone to let down the team, or, you know, be the cause of losing All-Ireland final. And that's fine. Like, that was my mindset, and it actually suits me, because going into games, like, I always have butterflies, and I always say they're a good thing. But like All-Ireland final day, and when you're coming home to Kerry, when you lose, you know, you're judged when you earn. So I knew that from an early age, but I think those things kind of suit me, that fear and that probably side of where I didn't back myself as much, maybe kind of kept me on my toes more than anything.
Yeah, that was Aidan O'Mahony. We're now going to be joined by Sean O'Sullivan. But before that, Shane Hannon, we had Colin Mullaney on here. He spoke about what he did during the pandemic. He only brought out a book. Sean O'Sullivan did the exact same thing. He put himself to good use during COVID. If you cast your mind back to March of last year, certainly for me, I did nothing for about 3 months. What did you do during COVID? How did you actually make the most out of all this time in the pandemic and lockdown?
Johnny, I didn't write a book, right?
No, because Sean did.
Let's get over it. Sean did, but to be fair, yeah, we had, I think, great plans back in March of last year, where you kind of look and see, right, we've got a few months here at least of doing potentially nothing, working from home. I could maybe write a book. I could do things that I've always said I didn't have time to do, and in the end, none of it is done. None of it is done
That's
whatsoever,
the spirit.
Johnny.
That's
like
the
I
spirit.
ended up. What I've done is I have actually a trip planned now in. It's been put off for about 1.5 years, 2 years because of COVID. But
to the Belgian Grand Prix.
No, it's not quite a Belgian Grand Prix trip. But you mentioned Georgia earlier on. We're flying, myself and 2 friends. You might remember I did Kilimanjaro a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
In Tanzania, we're flying to Russia to climb Mount Elbrus, which is in the Caucasus region, the Russian-Georgian border. It's the highest mountain in Europe. It's actually taller than Mont Blanc. So over 5,600 meters. A lot of snow and ice training that will go into it in advance. Crampons, ice axe, all that sort of stuff. So we've put it off. We have the flights booked. We have the deposit paid on the climb. So all we're waiting on really is COVID to calm the ham so we can do it and get the Russian visa sorted. So that's my plan. Hopefully May of next year, between April and July, it will have been at least attempted, Johnny. I won't say summited, but the summit is the plan. We're getting summit fever, so hopefully we can get to the top.
Summit to do next year. There we go. Yeah, Dan McDonnell, our erstwhile friend and colleague, listening and watching in this morning. I don't think he's been to Yerevan. I think it's one of those countries that the Irish Football Journalist hasn't been to, but he has been to Baku, he has been to Tbilisi. I've been to Baku and Tbilisi. Georgia is an absolutely amazing country, and I think you're going to enjoy that. Sean, have you been to the Caucasus yet on your quest to find out about how best it is to coach GA players?
No, unfortunately not. I think that's the secret.
Yeah, the players' advice. Yeah, the players' advice. You put your head down during lockdown and you come up with a book.
Yeah, well, it actually started before lockdown. I got the idea back in 2019 in a physics class 3 weeks before my leaving cert.
You got to explain that. Sorry, I have to stop you there. You got the idea for the players' advice in a physics class before you leaving cert.
Well, it was basically like I was just thinking what next after the leaving sort of. So to replace studying, I decided I'd put a book together. So the first thing I did from that, I did it because I went interrailing after. So I was in a hotel room in Brussels texting Alan Kearns from South Help Africa, because that's where all the royalties are going. So the first thing I did was get involved with the charity to say, like, can I do this book for you? And then I went recruiting players. And then when COVID hit in 2020, like, I just got more players from that because everyone was at home.
That is so cool. Alan Kearns, one of the last sort of proper dual players that you'll remember, and again, kind of would remember him well growing up following Galway. So how did it go from there then, talking to Alan, and obviously the whole thing mushroomed?
Yeah, I was just basically trying to get in contact then with the players. So I probably messaged 200 to 300, and then there's 107 in the book altogether. So, you know, half or a third is fairly decent.
Shane, what fascinates me about Gaelic football is the evolution of it in recent times. It's been so dramatic, and a book like this is pretty timely.
This is what players needed. Like, I'm interested to hear from Sean as to the target audience for this. Like, is this a book, Sean, that you're intending, I guess, for players at club level, county level as well, to kind of pick up and comb through? Is it for coaches? Is it for all of the above? Is it for the GAA fan who just wants to learn more about how the game works? So what was your target audience when you were thinking about it? And by the way, it's available in all bookstores for anyone looking for the stocking filler. But who exactly were you targeting when you were starting to write the book?
Yeah, the target audience initially was teenagers. So this year in the club, I coached the under 15 and under 13 boys. So sort of I had them two in mind for those age groups. Only, like, I've since had down in the club like 40-year-old players coming up to me telling, you know, how they picked something up off, you know, this player's piece or whatever. And then the same for coaches, like, just, yeah, it's for any GAA fan, really.
I mean, we remember the story in the last couple of years, Dean Rock charging for his expertise in free taking, and you know, setting aside time to kind of coach young players or current club players or county players even in the art of free taking. Like, that, is that an avenue from your own research even, Sean, that GAA players are starting to go down more and more, that preparation and intensity is almost becoming more professional, like in GAA? And a book like this, you know, GAA players are essentially looking for whatever marginal gains they can get in the sport.
Definitely, yeah, and just on that, in terms of the free taking, so the book itself is laid out by position, so it starts with the goalkeeper and goes all the way through to the full forward line. But just on that, Dean Rock and Oisin McConville both talk about free taking in their pieces, so I interviewed Oisin, and then Dean wrote his own piece on free taking.
What are the secrets to free taking then? What did Oisin and Dean come up with?
Dean, I don't have it offhand now, but he has a funny. He used some phrases like the something that starts with a P, point. Basically, it's the target behind the goal that he aims for. Because, like, I remember Mick Bohan talking before about Dean Rock used to put a hula hoop up on the net behind the goal, and basically it had to hit that, like, for his point to count.
Wow. The rock star, as he's known, I think, in the Dublin squad. If I can go back to your start with the goalkeeper, this obviously the position that has evolved incredibly fast since the Cluxton era, I guess. What was the, I guess, what summaries were drawn from that chapter?
Big thing would just be calmness in terms of the goalkeeper. So, like, there's sort of Niall Morgan in the goalkeepers as well. So I think I backed the right horse by getting him that time. He did his, before this year anyway, his peak.
You were there before anyone else, pretty much.
Yeah. I know, just about calmness, really, which is funny with him on his rampaging runs, like, but yeah, just on goalkeepers, probably just keeping a level head and communicating.
Just one thing, Sean, that I was wondering if it's covered in the book, and I'm sure it is, but rest and it being something that probably, you know, in the 70s and 80s, Gaelic footballers and managers even as well wouldn't have really considered it as an interesting discussion point. But burnout, overtraining, both huge issues in the GAA these days. Like, did you find that when chatting to the players for the book that maybe, even what you did when you weren't playing football or thinking about football was also very important.
Yeah, definitely. A good few some more of the former players than the current ones just talked about like the importance of, you know, having education and a career, basically something to fall back on after football, like, or hurling in some cases.
Is there a different mindset between footballers and hurlers? Did you find, like, speaking, and I know we spoke to camogie players and ladies footballers as well, like, are there different general mindsets, or are top tier GAA players in all codes just super focused? Like, did you find a difference in the hurlers and the footballers when talking to them?
Not too much. No, not really. No, actually, no. There's enough overlaps that it works like for both. Because I don't play hurling, but still, I pick stuff up from the hurlers.
Which of the games has evolved more, Sean? Because if you look at, we'll say the physicality that was brought into hurling, and Limerick have probably been the greatest exponents of that, is one thing. But I suppose there's an argument that the blanket defence won't work in hurling because you can score from the guts of 100 yards. Football has changed a lot. Like, from your perspective, I suppose, what game is going to change more in the next 10 to 20 years?
Not sure. That's a good question. I'm not sure really, because the way like hurling has gone so athletic now. If you look at the current Limerick team, like, you know, will it ever go back to, you know, if you compare them to the great Kilkenny team, you know, they're all probably, you know, 2 or 3 stone leaner, like, you know, in terms of just lighter, not muscle, like the Limerick level. So I'm not sure if it'll go back to that or if it'll go the opposite way where they're even stronger again, like, physically.
And you see now as well, obviously, the press is really, really big in football. Obviously, the wing-backs have become a big thing. Even at League of Ireland level, the pressing is a big thing. If you're an aspiring coach in Gaelic football, where do you see the game evolving into yourself? Like, if you want to get into coaching now, I guess your coaches probably I guess they have to keep innovating.
Yeah, definitely. Like, just with the 2 teams I'm with, like, I was 5 and 7 years older than the 2 teams I'm with. So, like, I'm sort of trying to pull from where I've come through, like, as opposed to looking ahead. You know, because I don't think underage it won't change that much. Like,
Sean, we know you plan to head into coaching yourself, but just a question for you on that. Like, are there pathways into GAA coaching? Like, I know in soccer you do your badges, you kind of work your way up the ladder, you get experience with certain teams. Like, in my experience, GAA can be almost territorial, a little bit cliquey as well, that you can get jobs with a club and keep that job for a number of years. It's who you know, not what you know. Like, are there pathways into GAA coaching, or how do you expect that journey is going to kick off for yourself?
Yeah, like, obviously there's the GPOs and GDAs depending on what part of the country you're in, but there's the courses you can do, you know, Foundation, Award 1, Award 2. Yeah, that is true, as you say, it can be very territorial.
Yeah, and I suppose, Sean, I suppose from the people you interviewed in the book, who came across as particularly sound, like the likes of a fella that you'd like to watch the darts with Shane Hannon on the 26th of the... Are you a darts man, actually? We're going to ask everyone. Sean is a darts fan. I'm going to ask everyone who's on the show until you are a darts fan, are you?
No. Well, it's been... I was just down in the club over the weekend, so they had it on.
Where's the club?
Moby Road, Nafina.
Oh yeah. We used to pass that. I was in DCU back in the day. Yeah, I used to pass it all the time. Like, so who are the sound people that you spoke to? People that you were particularly like, I wouldn't mind getting to know him.
Yeah, in fact, just the former players, like, they were allowed to be more giving, obviously, because so I did phone calls with, I think, 8 different players. So I had Brendan Cummins, The Rock, Dermot O'Sullivan, Oisin McConville, Kieran Donaghy, John Mulan, Ger Brennan. I think that was all. Hopefully I'm not leaving anyone.
You'd have to say, Shane, you've probably given him a job here because his ability to get people on the show should not be underestimated.
No, it's a fair point. It's a fair point, and getting 107 GA players to open up and start talking is an achievement almost in itself. Like for you, Sean, growing up watching football, like you said, you're an Fianna man. Who were your GA heroes, like player manager wise? Were there anyone you looked up to for inspiration? Was there anyone that in your mind kicked off this whole idea in the first place, maybe for you?
Well, my dad's a Kerry man, even though I'm.
Oh, Sullivan, there you go.
Yeah, but I'm true and true dub. But like Declan O'Sullivan would have been one, like just had it all. He's in the book. That's partially why I'm mentioning. But like he did a piece on like sort of all of the headings, and yeah, his is very good.
And finally, before we wrap, happy Christmas, Sean. Where can people get the book?
Any bookshop, yeah, all good book. Well, all bookshops.
Beautiful stuff, Sean. Beautiful. And listen, just for your age, I think it's phenomenal what you're doing to have brought out a book at your age, but also just have gotten that litany of really good characters. And the very best of luck with it.
Thanks.
Yeah, that was Sean O'Sullivan. Save yourself, Sean. That's Sean O'Sullivan with the Players' Advice. The book, as you said, there is available in all bookshops. Coming up on OTB Sports Radio today, OTB Gold, Luke Keeney's at 1 o'clock. The Koi Gig Pod is at 3 p.m. The Retro Panel, 4 p.m. And that's going to talk about the importance of Club GA. 6 o'clock, OTB Gold with Dennis Ogie Morn. Richie Forristal of the Racing Post will be next. He's going to talk about the Freddie Tylicki case. So we have plenty to come before we end up the show. As I say, it's the penultimate show before Christmas.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Newspapers have called it the greatest club game ever.
Munster legends Alan Quinlan and Niamh Briggs are joining forces to bring you all the latest analysis, news, interviews and so much more.
The strength of Munster rugby has always been the big boys up front. There's a lot of pressure on these guys continuously.
I'm actually really, really excited for it.
The Red 78 with Alan Quinlan and Niamh Briggs. Available every Wednesday. Don't miss a moment of action. Subscribe to the Rugby channel on the OTB Sports app and turn on your notifications now.
Do you think maybe with some of the talented players you played with previously, if you had the same kind of professionalism and all that attached to you, that you could have made those steps?
Absolutely, 100%. Because it does make a big difference where the girls with the tracksuit situation. I mean, we were going to countries that was 2 hours away, but because we hadn't got the funding to get a plane straight to it, we were travelling 9 and 8 hours to get to these places. And it did take its toll because we were leaving on Thursday, training on Friday, playing on Saturday. And if we're playing on Saturday, we probably didn't get our food. Our food didn't arrive. There was loads of millions of obstacles that I could be here for 3 hours speaking to you about. But if we had the opportunities and the setup and everything, they don't have to worry about nothing, where we had to worry about every single aspect of our life going to play for their country. I reckon 100% we'd have qualified. The match that comes to mind is the away game against Iceland.
Yeah.
And I'm not messing, Karen. We played them on an ice rink.
Yeah, I think that was one of the first matches I actually got to watch of your away games because it was on, I think, Eurosport.
Eurosport at the time.
And like, you couldn't even get your footing. It was, I don't know what kind of match I was expecting to watch, but I was so excited for it because like, I knew some of the girls. I'd watched or looked up to so many of them, and for it to be taken away due to conditions, it just felt heartbreaking for you. Because
that's what you're saying.
That squad, yeah.
When you're saying that taken away, I felt the same at the time. I says, they're ruining an ambition of all these girls. That's what they're putting their heart and soul into it. And like, I was asked the question, like, why, how can it be called off? Because it should have never have happened. And I was told if you fall and you draw blood on your head, maybe it will be. Because as you know, the Icelandics were used to it.
Yeah.
But it was like going up to Smithfield on the ice rink. And it broke my heart because it was the only opportunity that I knew that we were going to get to it, a campaign.
Car insurance is boring, but you don't have to be. Get Set Go is the kind of car insurance you can sort in a few minutes online, then bounce on with your day. Are you ready for Quick Start Insurance? Get a quote now at getsetgo.ie. MCL Insurance Services Ireland Limited, trading as getsetgo.ie, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Yeah, you'd hope that things have improved for women's football since then. The tale told by Olivia O'Toole. That was on the Coy Big Gig pod. It was on the OTB Sports in association with Cabri FC, the official snack partner of the Republic of Ireland women's national team. The full episode is available to podcast right now and every Tuesday on the OTB Sports app, and you can watch it back on the Off the Ball YouTube channel. And just an update, Dan, of course, has been to Yerevan. Remember that goal from Keith Fahey back in the day? Vital win. So, Richie Forristal, have you been to Yerevan? Have you been to that part of the world?
Afraid not, Johnny, no. I'm a bit of a homeboy.
Yeah, true. You were at the Breeders' Cup, to be fair. There are some junkets in the race and journalism game that haven't gone away.
Yeah, it's a busy week, Johnny. I'm sure you'll understand that. I'm sure you'll appreciate it. It is a busy week for the few days that you're there, but it's great. I first went in 2018, and obviously I missed last year because of the pandemic, but I thoroughly enjoy going over. I've been to Del Mar, been to Santa Anita, and been to Churchill Downs, so it's a great gig to do. And I would never have been an American flat racing man previously, but it's great to do something different like that and see how they do it over there.
Yeah, like I love going racing over there, I have to say. We have you on, Richie, I suppose, to talk about the racing calendar over the next, I suppose, week or so after Christmas. But firstly, the Freddie Tylicki case, it's given a lot of prominence just in the back of the Irish Examiner. Tommy Lyons and the lads do great work on the Examiner with regard to racing. And the Freddie Tylicki case, so he won a High Court claim against Graham Gibbons for negligent riding, which resulted in a fall that left him with life-changing injuries. Now, I would argue myself that there's been an awful lot of coverage of the Bryony Frost, Robbie Dunn case, which was big, but this is really, really big, and it's obviously a horrific case, and because of the paralysis that befell Freddie Tylicki. But this court judgment, Richie, big news in racing.
It is, yeah, and you could go beyond that, Johnny, and say it's potentially big news in sport. When you have high collision and dangerous sports, whether it's rugby or racing or, American football, whatever you want, there's always the potential for serious injury and, holding people culpable in that environment when, everyone is riding to win, for example, and it's a high pressured environment, holding people culpable is something that, hasn't been done. But it's worth pointing out really that the judge in this case, Judge Karen Walden-Smith, has kind of warned against that. And I'll just read you some of her comments, Johnny, if you want. She said, I stress that the threshold for liability of negligence is a high one. The finding does not set a precedent either within horse racing or sport generally. So she has addressed that specifically there. And just further on it, she kind of reported hearing a suggestion that a ruling in favour of Tylicki, this is from Chris Cook's piece in today's Racing Post, I should add, would make it very difficult for any jockey and indeed any sportsman or woman to be confident that they would be able to compete as hard as they can in order to win, for fear that they could be sued if someone suffers an injury. But she rejected that line of thinking, adding for emphasis that this case is a standalone and not the thin end of the wedge. So on the one hand, everyone is kind of scrambling a bit, wondering, what does this mean? And is it going to have serious ramifications in terms of all sports bodies gaining insurance and whatnot, and whether it sets a dangerous precedent? Her comments would suggest otherwise, and that the case has been taken on its merits. I suppose there are various factors here worth considering. Maybe first of all, on the day it happened, Johnny, the hearing was kind of hastily convened, if you like, because Freddie Tylicki was obviously not in a position to attend. Yeah. And I think Jim Crowley didn't attend either. So you can't have a satisfactory hearing if the relevant people aren't there. So that's on the BHA stewards to some extent. They didn't defer it at the time. And obviously the injuries then suffered by Freddie exacerbate the case. But it shouldn't really be that way. The injuries, whether someone is paralysed or tragically killed in an incident like this, shouldn't really matter. The bottom line is interference in racing needs to be policed properly, and that is something that hasn't probably happened over the last number of years in Ireland or Britain. maybe more so in Britain. It's, I think, 12 years since there was a dangerous riding case in Britain, since any rider was found guilty of dangerous riding. Now, we don't know. I mean, obviously the court didn't rule whether this was an incident of careless riding or dangerous riding, because that's not their jurisdiction. They don't abide by that rule book, if you like. But 12 years without a dangerous riding incident, it doesn't really stack up. There was one actually here in the autumn, and there was one here 2 years ago. You remember at Cork, there was one at Ballinrobe in the autumn. So we've had a couple recently. But the fear the whole time is with the authorities is if they find someone guilty of dangerous riding, that they will then be open to these sort of claims. So that kind of then in turn fosters a culture of, anything goes, winning at all costs, as we've discussed frequently before. And that's a pretty dangerous environment. So I must say, am I surprised that this has happened and it has come to this? No. If, that I have to say that I'm not surprised it came to this, because it hasn't been policed properly over the last number of years.
Yes. Jim Crowley obviously made statements in the court as well in relation to what may or may not have happened that day that are very, very important to the case. But you rode for many years. What actually happened here from a jockey's perspective?
I would love to be able to answer that question honestly, Johnny, but it's very hard to get a replay of it. So I can't. What I can tell you is what was reported in that, and they have basically found that Graham Gibbons came across Freddie Tylicki's mount and basically caused that horse to fall. That's basically what happened. This is, as you kind of alluded to earlier, this is something that has been discussed a lot recently, and it's something that the stewards, just bottom line is, they need to do better on, because the jockeys will ride to the rules in each country. If you remember a few years ago in France, or a lot of the time in America still, and other foreign jurisdictions, the jockeys ride to the rules as they are implemented in that country. And in France previously, before the rules were changed, jockeys kept straight because they knew they had to, because if they didn't keep straight, they were going to get thrown out. End of. If you interfered with someone, you went behind them. It doesn't happen in France anymore, and it has never happened in Britain or Ireland, basically. So the jockeys ride accordingly. They'll take the suspension on the chin for careless riding. Once they win the race, they're happy. That is something that has to change, and this case might be a timely reminder at this stage for the authorities to come down harder on these things. You might remember a couple of months ago, Johnny, I did a piece with Aidan O'Brien actually, and he came out very strongly on this, and it wouldn't be kind of, it wouldn't be, it wouldn't be Aidan's kind of way of doing things to come out so forcefully. He is obviously, seen his own daughter injured in an incident, and he was very strong at the time in relation to the matron stakes that Shane Foley rode what he felt was dangerously. And I put it to him at the time, I says, well, hang on, Ryan Moore in the Champion Stakes half an hour later drifted fully across the track and allowed his mount to do that and carried Tarnawa with him. And he said, that was careless. I think he said something along the lines of, and I'm
trying to recollect here.
I think he should have. I think he said that Ryan should have got 10 days for careless, and Shane should have got a month for dangerous. I might even have it here in front of me.
But even on that, like that would be like completely out of kilter with what happens. Even for him to say Ryan should have gotten 10 days would have been massive. And obviously Shane effectively saying he rode dangerously or whatever for 30.
Yeah. What he said was Ryan should have got a week for careless and Shane should have got a month for dangerous. It's not rocket science. That's fairly strong talk from a man who we know is fairly careful with what he says. So I mean,
Sorry, Richie. Yeah, the thing here, Shane, is that like you don't, you have your wide interest in sports, Shane, but people do not realise the dangers that jockeys are. This is just on the flat, not even riding over a fence. If you're riding at 40 miles an hour on a relatively hard all-weather surface, if you fall and there are 14 horses around you, you're in big stuck here.
Yeah, and I guess the point on this, lads, is that the skill of the jockeys has to come into effect. Like Richie, you mentioned a couple of the quotes from the judge Karen Walden-Smith in this particular case, and like one quote that stood out for me when I was reading about this, what she was talking about. She said, and Nellie Dean, of course, was the mount, but Freddie Tylicki was on board, and she said in court, if Mr. Gibbons was not aware of Nellie Dean's presence, he clearly should have been. So clearly in this ruling, Richie, the judge has given benefit of the doubt that Graham Gibbons is an experienced enough jockey, and a jockey at that level should be aware of the horses around him.
Yeah, and it's one of the first rules of race riding is you have to be aware of the people and the horses around you, because, you know, if you go out and you ride without due care and caution for them, accidents will happen and people will get hurt. You go back to you'll remember as well, Johnny, again, this one will be very familiar to you, the very tragic incident at Galway many years ago with Sean
Timmy Hoolan,
and Timmy Hoolan. Subsequently, Timmy, by all accounts, you know, held himself responsible for his role in that, and unfortunately took his own life subsequently. Like, that is the ultimate tragedy in relation to something like this. You have one man who died as a result of the fall, and another man who blamed himself for it.
I think you'd argue that he's been almost written out of Irish racing, tragically.
Yeah, it's very sad, and that you know, that's an extreme case, but that can happen. And horses can get falls and get hurt and get killed, and jockeys can get falls and get hurt and get killed. So that is the environment within which they operate, and they have to ride accordingly. And anyone who isn't kind of going out on a daily basis, you know, with that sort of mindset in their head, you know, that they need to, it's not just about winning. It's like, there is a difference between shutting doors and tactical race riding and subtly being dangerous, which can happen. So that is something that, as I say, the stewards need to be more proactive on. It's been kind of going on long enough, and enough of us have been talking about it for long enough now, that they need to start picking up the ball on this and doing better on it.
Just, you mentioned Chris Cook as well. He had a brilliant article on this in conjunction with the Bryony Frost case at the time and the weighing room sort of culture. And I'm going back to the 1st of December here. Jim Crowley tells High Court that Graham Gibbons' breath smelt of alcohol on day of Freddie Tylicki collision. And as Chris wrote about at the time, this is a very, very difficult case, because obviously if this were the case and you thought that somebody who was riding in a race smelt of alcohol, obviously you got to react there. But Chris's point was that there's an omerta maybe in the weighing room that needs to be challenged. I don't know what you made of that.
Well, there's a whole discussion there about that. I mean, the times have changed, and we all have to accept that. And you know, there was a time when lads used to go out with a stiffener beforehand. And when I was riding, plenty lads used to ride like that when they'd have been, you know, had a hairy night the night before. That sort of thing is not acceptable anymore. And that is why we have breath tests and alcohol tests and so on. And yes, I think there's, you know, you can look at it now and say, why didn't the senior jockeys intervene? They probably should have. But it's easy to say that now. It's hard to walk up to someone on the day and tell them they shouldn't be riding, or to go into the steward and say, I think he needs to be breath tested. Whereas that culture obviously hasn't existed previously, and it's something that needs to be looked at. You know, the weighing room culture has obviously come in for a lot of stick lately. I can only speak from my own experience in there. It was always very positive. But when someone has a problem, you know, there needs to be structures in place, or there needs to be people they can speak to, whether it's, you know, a chaplain of some sort or a welfare officer. They need to be able to go to someone. We have to keep up with the times in that respect. There's no doubt about that. When you look at the Bryony Frost case, you know, she obviously didn't feel she could speak to anyone, or that she wasn't being listened to properly. Certainly that seems to be the insinuation in relation to the PGA. So, I mean, you know, there was a failure there, I suppose, on behalf of senior jockeys, on behalf of the PGA, on behalf of the BHA, that none of them stepped up in time. Now we're talking about a different case here, so I don't conflate two cases. But if you're talking about that aspect of the weigh room, there was a lot of failures there that it led to what it ultimately led to.
Richie, just one on something you mentioned there, the fact that, you know, it's hard to get footage of this race at Kempton from 2016 in which this terrible incident happened. Was that the case in court? I mean, we're talking about a very short space of time here. There's only, I think it's a 4-second space of time in which this incident is said to have happened. So clearly the court were able to come to a judgment regardless. But did they have the footage in court, or was it?
Oh yes, to the best of my knowledge they did. Yes, and they showed it, and it was all kind of gone through. I'm just not aware that it's in the public domain at the moment. A lot of the time when there's an incident like this, they get taken offline, which you can understand. And when I looked for this previously, I couldn't find it. I don't know if you've seen the incident recently, Johnny.
No, I didn't. Personally, I probably wouldn't want to watch it. I did see. I actually was looking for it there. I saw one of the tabloids today has a still image of sort of the incident, and to be honest, that's as much as I've seen. I guess with respect, I wasn't making a judgment on the case, and with respect to Freddie, I simply didn't want to watch that. And I think I guess Richie, that's the whole point, that you're not able to watch it.
Yeah, no, they've just, it's the same when horses are seriously injured or fatally injured, they tend to remove it because it's unfortunate and no one really wants to be seeing it. It's not to hide these things, but it's just not, it's not comfortable to view.
Freddie and Richie, of course, have something in common. They're former jockeys who have gone on to become very good in the media. Richie, you will be flat out over the Leopardstown, Limerick, Down Royal, Kempton and all of that going on from the 26th onward. Obviously, Leopardstown, 5,000 people, which isn't ideal. It's a lot better than none, though. You must be looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be a great few days again, Johnny. It always is. You might have seen Gordon Elliott's comment in the last 2 days that he's anxious for good, safe ground, which is a slight concern at Leopardstown.
This is December, Richie. How nuts is this? And it's not even unusual anymore.
It's not. No, we've had it in December and February for the Dublin Racing Festival. So hopefully they will have put on plenty of water and we'll get all the good horses that we want to see there. There's some great racing in store. I'd be always kind of fond of the 3 mile chasing category, and you've got Delta Work going up there, and we've obviously got Minalindo, of course, going to Kempton for the King George as well. That should be a cracking race.
A King George as well. No Irish winner since Kicking King in, was it 2006?
Yeah, he won back-to-back. It's remarkable. Yeah, it's just one race that we have not had a bounce in the ball, and Vautour got chinned in it a few years ago. Don Cossack fell in the same race, 2 out or 3 out when he was running a big race. So we just haven't had the bounce of the ball, but given the way things have gone this year, the Irish horses are winning everything basically in terms of the marquee British jump races. So you'd imagine it would be, it's a good opportunity for us to kind of to get one in that again. And of course, Rachel Blackmore will be doing the steering. She's had a year like no other. It's just incredible what she has achieved, and she's getting all the accolades at the moment in the various awards. So it'd be good to see Minalindo show up well in Kempton as well.
And the best day of the year to buy the Racing Post is, of course, Christmas Eve, because you get all the cards for the 26th.
That's right, and you get Gavin Lynch's column this year as well, John. You know Gavin.
He's no good. No one about sport.
He's a great man for looking ahead and seeing how all these races are going to impact in terms of the Cheltenham Festival in the months to come. And his column will be in the paper on Friday.
Yeah, Gavin is top notch. Christopher Henry on YouTube. Can I get a birthday shout out? You'll make a South Derry lad very happy. And I hope you have a great birthday, Christopher. Richie, we're talking about things that people got into during lockdown. Shane Hannon, you'll be very impressed that Richie went from being a bit of a novice to an open water swimmer. And Richie, this has become a massive part of your life, getting into the open sea.
It has, Johnny, yeah. I don't know what we were talking about. Me, no, Johnny, but yeah, and I'm actually sporting my Clonakilty Dolphins shirt, if you can see it, or a hoodie.
Is that the club?
It's not even a club. It's just a group of us on WhatsApp, and it's a group that's growing all the time. I swam for 12 months from kind of August to August through the winter, just in togs and only kind of, casually swimming for 10, 15, 20 minutes. And I say 2 or 3 times a week all winter last winter. And it got to, when it basically got to 12 months, August this year, I kind of wanted to challenge myself a bit and get out of the comfort zone. So I started doing a bit of distance swimming, and I fell in with this Clonakilty Dolphins crew, and they're a great bunch of people, and we get out kind of most days, even at the moment, certainly 4 or 5 days a week. It's been a real challenge, and as you say, I would have been very much in beginner mode even a few months ago before I joined these guys. And I remember the first time I went out in choppy waters, and I came in pretty quick. I wasn't able for it, and I wasn't ready for it, and I wasn't expecting it. And in the space of a few months, I was out there yesterday, and it was fairly mental out there, but you get comfortable in it and you learn how to cope in it. And your technique improves as the more you do, obviously, like anything. So yeah, it's been great. I've got a great kick out of it, and looking forward to when the kind of the long distance swims pick up again in the spring and summer. Looking forward to doing a few more of them.
I can only imagine what's in store for you in terms of long distance swims. Richie, thanks a million for your time.
Thanks, folks.
There you go, Shane Hannon. That's the next quest for you, I guess, is to get into the open water swimming.
Johnny, right. So Sean O'Sullivan, young Sean O'Sullivan, wrote a book. Cathal Milani wrote a book. Richie Forristal's out open water swimming. For the last year and a half, 2 years, all I've done essentially is been sitting here scratching myself. So I'm way off to cry into my Cocoa Pops.
Scratching yourself?
Well, I haven't written a book.
In a spiritual sense?
A spiritual sense, yeah, hypothetical sense. But certainly that would make you start to question how you've spent lockdown. Although maybe the next couple of months I'll knuckle down and do something more productive, because those lads this morning have certainly made a few of us feel a little bit useless, to say the least.
I think you're far from that, Shane. Great having you on this morning.
Cheers, Johnny. Happy Christmas.
Same to yourself, yeah. And thanks to all the lads for coming on. Thanks for Richie Forristal as well to talk about obviously what was a complex case. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Tomorrow morning is the last OTB AM before Christmas. Kenny Cunningham is going to join Will in studio for an OTB AM Christmas special. Who better to put you in form than Will and the great Kenny Cunningham? Right now we're going to bring you Dave McIntyre and Kieran Cunningham with Joe last night, looking back at the 2021 sporting year. All the best.
You're very welcome back. Joe Malloy with you this evening. Dave McIntyre is still here. Hello.
Hi, Joe.
And Kieran Cunningham joins us as well, chief sports writer with the Irish Daily Star. Hello.
Hi, Joe. Hi, Dave.
Now, you join us at an interesting point, Kieran, because Dave McIntyre, Richie McCormack were bemoaning the GA Championship. Dave admittedly picked out a couple of games which were pretty thrilling. We got you to pick 3 highlights here, 1 low light. We'll try and get through as many as we can. COVID was not allowed to be picked as your low light. So at number 3, you've got some men's Gaelic football in for us in your highlight section, obviously.
Yeah, and that's I picked the All-Ireland football semi-finals, the extra time wins for Tyrone over Kerry and Mayo over Dublin. And it's because this won't happen very often, Joe, that, you know, we have finals, All-Ireland final without Dublin and Kerry. You know, they are going to dominate, as they have for most of the time of the history of the GA. And what the structures they have in place now and the personnel they have in place, that they will be in more finals than they're not. So just the storylines around them, you know, the fact that, you know, the Tyrone-Kerry game was such a seesaw affair, and, you know, the history of their rivalry with Kerry, and then Mayo's very recent and bitter history with Dublin, and finally getting the better of them. And even though Mayo lost the final, I still think the journey matters. That win still mattered to Mayo. It's still a win that Mayo supporters will look back on in years to come, like Donegal looked back on the 2014 semi-final win over Dublin. So to me, that week, those semi-finals were a huge highlight.
Yeah, to jog a memory, 14th of August was Mayo against Dublin. Mayo 17 points, Dublin 14 points after extra time. My 2 strongest memories of this day are at half-time, Dublin being 10 points to 4 up, 6-point lead. It's an unassailable Dublin lead. They'd had easy possession. They'd scored a point once where they kept the ball for what felt like 25 minutes. I'm sure it was closer to maybe 2 minutes. And I don't know who said it at half-time, but effectively in RTE said, the game's over. Like, we can all go home here. It's done. And nobody...
It was Colin O'Rourke.
It was O'Rourke, yeah. And, like, nobody threw that back in O'Rourke's face afterwards. It was a perfectly sane thing to say. So I remembered that. I remember O'Rourke... Well, I obviously don't remember it that well. I remember somebody saying, let's go, because we're done. The match is over, because everybody was saying that. And then Diarmuid O'Connor diving through the air to keep the ball in play for a crucial score as well. I mean, so, Kieran, it's one of the great comebacks, that one.
Yeah, and the Rob Henley, you know, the retake in 45 just into extra time. You know, especially, you know, when you look at the backstory, Rob Henley, a really bitter, you know, he had a horrible experience against Dublin in the All-Ireland final, being sent off, the concession of a penalty, those kick-outs coming under huge pressure. And that took a huge toll on him. Like, it wasn't easy for anybody to go through what he had to go through after that final. You know, it lingered for a couple of years. So that did look like redemption. You know, from a Mayo point of view, it's a great shame they didn't finish the deal. But, you know, there was just it just felt special watching that, though. And you know, even the first half, like there was 20 minutes spell in the first half that Dublin played the best football of the championship. And it was completely forgotten now because they were under par for most of it. But they did play the best football of the championship in that period, and it will kill them that they didn't close it out. Yeah. You know, but it might be the best thing that happened to that team. It might galvanise them for another couple.
Another 5 in a row. Yeah, 6 in a row. So another abiding memory of that evening in Croke Park, I remember James Horn on the pitch and the celebrations and a real, I think, sense, Mayo are going to win, Sam. This is the year. It's going to happen. I mean, that was the feeling in the semi-final. They've beaten the Dubs. I mean, this is it. Fast forward, 28th of August, Kerry 22 points, Tyrone 314, which is your other choice here, Kieran. The memories I have, you can tell us why you picked this, are the impact of Colin McShane and the Tyrone defence getting on top. I think Clifford was brilliant. Wasn't David Clifford brilliant in this game? He went off injured.
Yeah, he went off injured. He was probably on the match up to learn. Yeah.
And of course, Sean Kavanagh versus Pat Spillane, like the madness of this whole game.
Yeah. And, and because so much had been made of the old rivalry beforehand, and, Tyrone did seem to try and feed off the history of that rivalry, and they took the war into it, and it just threw up so much stuff about like Kerry had looked as sensational, going through Munster, but it did throw up stuff about whether that's a good way to go into an All-Ireland semi-final. When Tyrone had a really hard passage. It's one of the hardest won All-Irelands anybody ever won. When you look at the teams they beat along the way, they've beaten all the recent Ulster championships, Donegal, Monaghan and Cavan, beaten Kerry and then beaten the team who beat Dublin. So it wasn't an easy All-Ireland one. And there's just something about a Tyrone team and full flag. Like my own county would have a huge rivalry with them, and some strange days against them. But, you can't but admire the doggedness and the cussedness of Tyrone and the way they don't really care what anybody thinks about them. They are the great usurpers.
And yet, Dave, I think, listening to you in the news round, you'd agree those games were amazing. They're not compensating for the overall picture men's football finds itself in for the vast majority of the summer.
No, really not. It was the Ulster Championship was interesting this year, as it always is, and I remember the closing stages of Donegal Derry. That was a fantastic watch, and Derry came so close to almost sneaking out of Ballybuffet with a draw. But there was a couple of interesting things in the semi-finals. I would disagree with Kieran. Now, I can't speak for Mayo people because I'm not from the county, but I remember thinking after that game, if they don't win the All-Ireland this year, this game is going to count for very little. And all of the excuses that people associated maybe with Dublin would be able to throw at them would then be thrown on their faces. The fact that Dublin looked like they'd lost their bite, they'd lost their spark. There was a couple of big calls that went against Dublin, that Dublin weren't nowhere close to being at their full flow, and Mayo were a bit fortunate to get through the game. I would disagree with all of that, but that is some of the talk that would have been fired in that direction if they didn't go on and win the All-Ireland. And yet again, you have Mayo dethroning the All-Ireland champions and not winning the All-Ireland, as they did in 2012, they did in 2013, they did it in 2011 when they beat Cork. Now, Mayo fans could correct me on it, but when you beat Dublin and you don't win the All-Ireland, I think it took an awful lot away from that victory. And when Kieran talks about Tyrone, and they do not care what the rest of the country thinks about them. Remember, the context of the build-up to this game was the delay in that semi-final due to the outbreak of COVID in the Tyrone camp, and they played a very calm, collected but risky game with the GAA when it came to an extension being given to them in order for this game to be played. It was absolutely right, it should have been played. Kerry themselves would not have wanted to be in an All-Ireland final, having played the game been played on paper rather than on the turf in Croke Park. But there was a lot of finger pointing in the build-up to that game, and Tyrone just put it all out of their minds and did what Tyrone have done so well going back to the early days of Mickey Hart. Okay, so Kieran Cunningham's number 3, those All-Ireland football semi-finals. Number 3 for you, Dave, Meath ladies. Yeah, so in a year maybe in Gaelic football where I was left overall a bit disappointed, the story of the Meath ladies was just incredible. And I was really just a bit of a bandwagon jumper late on in the season, and I would have to hand an awful lot of credit to Aisling O'Reilly, who was on most mornings on OTB AM with Ger and with Owen, and she was largely responsible for the context that she put around the journey that this Meath team had been on, where they had come from, the difficulties that Meath ladies were having it from grassroots level all the way up to the senior team. They were the ignominy of dropping down a division in terms of championship football and giving absolutely no chance to them coming into the championship. And every hurdle that was put in front of them, they just managed to find a way to get past it. And it all culminated in the final. And they looked like they've been playing All-Ireland finals at that level for a long time. And they look like the sort of side that you would use for that old adage, you have to lose one before you win one. They looked like a side that had experience of losing an All-Ireland final and therefore had that extra bit of hunger, that bit of bite, the nous and the composure when it looked like Dublin were going to come back at them. And I just thought it was just an unbelievable story, an unbelievable journey. And the guts is one thing and the composure they showed, but the skill, a couple of moments in that final where there was just brilliant pieces of skill that saw them get over the line. It was an incredible story.
Yeah, no, it sure was. I'm going to pick up the pace here because we won't get to your 3 highlights and your low light if I keep going at this kind of a pace. Dave, you can then jump in for your number 2. Now, it's safe to say this would not have made your 3 highlights of the sporting year that was last year, or for the last, I don't know how long you've been out of love with Formula 1 for, but certainly the last probably 15, 20 years. And here we are, you've picked out the last 5 minutes, aka the abomination that was the last 5 minutes of the Formula 1 season in the Abu Dhabi race. This is number 2 on your highlights of the year.
Well, I mean, I would challenge anybody to come up with a more dramatic 5 minutes of sport in 2021 than that. I mean, it is up there with the most jaw-dropping, edge of your seat. Is this actually happening before my eyes? 5 minutes of live sport that I can ever remember watching. It just seemed, I just go back to, I remember Christian Horner was speaking live to Sky and he said, we need the Formula 1 gods to shine on us over the next 40 minutes or so. In truth, we need a miracle. And what unfolded after that was miraculous. Everything that they needed to go their way went their way. And then there was the whole, scrambling online, trying to figure out what the rules were, understanding why this was happening, what decisions were being made in the background. And then you've got Toto shouting at the race director, no, Michael, no, this is not right. And then the takeover in the corner when Verstappen went past Hamilton and they almost touched wheels. And then Hamilton came roaring back at him and it was just ripping. Absolutely gripping. And I don't think we'll ever see anything like that in Formula 1 again. It was astonishing. And when I was on the Monday with you after it on the news round, I likened it to that Aguero goal in 2012 where the entire year comes down to one moment and it leaves you absolutely speechless.
Kieran, you're number 2 for highlight of the year. Salah. Mohamed Salah. The great underrated Mo Salah, I think, in many respects.
Yeah. No, but just as a theme through the 3 pieces I picked, and it might be Hakuna Matata, what Kelly Harrington was saying, kept saying in Tokyo, and no worries, because this has been such a difficult couple of years for everybody. And, there's so much to be negative and to get people down about because of what's happened around COVID and lockdown, etc. And, it was one of the things that's helped me wean me off Twitter big time that, I don't go on it anywhere near as much. It's just because the constant stream of negativity really gets to you. And the things I picked out for sport were just things that put a smile on my face. And Mohamed Salah is one of those players, like just the joy he takes in the game. You just see that big smile. And the way he's like a child in sand, he's just taking there's just an exuberance about him, and he tries things and he tries tricks, and his personal highlights reel for this season. How many sensational goals has he scored already? I don't care if he's the best player in the world or the GOAT and all this nonsense. Who cares? You enjoy while he's there. I don't think Liverpool will win the Premier League. I think it's they might win the Champions League, but it's very hard to win because the 3 English teams. All 3 of the English teams are very strong. Bayern will be tough. ESG will be tough. So he might end the season without a trophy, but that doesn't mean you can't savour what he brings. And he's sensational to watch. I love watching.
Yeah, I was on Sally Rooney buzz during the summer excavation of reading all her interviews when.
She talked about him in the Guardian. Yeah, I read that.
Yeah, it was amazing. So you did think in the Guardian, what's on your radar? And so they ask you, film, book, and so it came to sport. And I thought she summed it up quite well. Though I have no real understanding of the mechanics of football and can only nod along helplessly at complex post-match analyses, I do enjoy watching people who are enormously good at something, enormously good. I'm not very good at reading, so I don't think she's going to enjoy this section. I do enjoy people who are enormously good at something. Actually, it's a typo. I'm forgiven. There's a typo on this, which I'm sure is not Sally Rooney's fault. But in effect, doing something that they're very good. And Liverpool's Mohamed Salah, the Premier League's top goal scorer at the time of writing, is truly spectacularly good at playing football. The ingenuity of professional footballers always impresses me, not only because of their extreme technical skill, but because of the unimaginably rapid pace at which they have to make high-pressure decisions. She concludes by saying, "For me, watching Mohamed Salah play football is not unlike staring up at the stars and contemplating the vastness of the universe. It makes my own life seem nice and small." So there you go.
Yeah, well.
Cunningham watches Mo Salah and looks up at the stars and stays off Twitter. I mean, if that's 2021, that's not so bad.
Yeah, it's a victory. Absolutely.
Give us your sporting highlight then, Kieran, of the year 2021.
Well, like if I was being perfectly honest, I'd be throwing in a lot of familiar ones that you've heard over the last few days, like Kelly Harrington, Rachel Blackmore, etc. And they were brilliant. And, Paul O'Donoghue, Clint McCarthy and so on. What we saw at the Paralympics, Ireland beating the All Blacks. But I just wanted to go for something a little bit different. And there's something, that Hakuna Matata theme. And it was the Ireland women's hockey team before their first world game at the Olympics against South Africa. And it was a really tough road for that women's team to get to the Olympics. It meant a huge amount to them. And when Oran Naveen was played, a load of the players were burst out laughing or were smiling. They were absolutely buzzing. I've never seen any Irish team get such a buzz out of an anthem or out of being there. And they went on to beat South Africa 2-0 in the game, which made it even better. They had a mixed Olympics overall, but just that moment, it just summed up, what the Olympics means to a lot of people and why it matters, even though there's a lot of reasons why it shouldn't matter.
So you're on a let's stop and smell the flowers a bit more buzz here.
Absolutely, because, I could pick out so many reasons to turn off sport, but those three, I think, more than ever, we need a bit of joy and distraction. And so I look for that in sport a lot too.
Yeah. Like that one, Dave?
Yeah, it was a great moment, and it's a different way of looking at the sporting highlights of the year, obviously, as opposed to a massive win or a massive moment. It's I can see why Kieran has gone down that road, and I'd say, well, with those players, they'll never forget that, and they'll be looking back on those few seconds of that video when they're a little bit older, and that when they see the smile on their faces and the way that they reacted to that moment, they'll be able to remember exactly how they felt at the time.
So 2021, Dave, you're in at number one. You've had 3 Meath ladies footballers upsetting the odds. You've had 2 last 5 minutes of the Formula 1 season. The number one highlight from the sporting year 2021.
Well, I've changed my mind in the last 60 minutes, so I have, from when I was chatting to JP a couple of hours ago before we come on tonight. The big mentions were, I was at this year's FAI Cup final. It was an astonishing occasion. Quality in the pitch probably wasn't great until extra time. There's the continued excellence of Katie Taylor, and Kieran's mentioned Kelly Harrington. I mean, that was just absolutely unbelievable. Ireland's wins over England, New Zealand. Rachel Blackmore was going to be my number one because for the sustained excellence over a 12-month period, culminating in the awards that she picked up last weekend. I remember that win on Honeysuckle in the champion hurdle, and I just thought that was a once-off. And to see her go out and walk up, become the first woman to win the jockey's title at Cheltenham was just unbelievable. And then to follow it up a fortnight later and winning the Grand National, absolutely astonishing. But I have to go back to how I felt watching Phil Mickelson win the PGA Championship. It was gripping, and for me it was up there with edge of the seat stuff in comparison with what happened in the Formula 1, because I mean, for a man of his age, 8 years after his last major, where his game was apparently at in the build-up, some of the shots he hit during it was unbelievable. The guys, sort of calibre of guys, the young guys he was holding off, him being my all-time favourite golfer as it is anyway, and the way he closed it out. And there was one moment in particular where he spent 4 or 5 minutes with his brother, his caddy, agonising over how he should hit his shot. They talked through it, and the ball had barely left the club face. And he just turned around and he said to him, kind of like that, yeah? And he stitched it exactly where he wanted to put it. And I was on my feet going, Phil, that is why we love you.
Yeah.
And what he achieved, I don't think will ever be achieved by another golfer again, given the calibre of players who come out of college and the collegiate system in the States, the distance they hit the ball. It is no country for old men now, the way the golf game is going at the elite level. It was an astonishing 4 or 5 hours viewing. It really was. Then at the end, when they're coming down the 18th fairway, and Brooks Koepka is getting his knee dinged, and the stewards and the police seem to have lost complete control of what's happening. Just brilliant stuff.
It was, I mean, without question, it's the standout golfing moment of the year for sure. And the other thing, the lovely thing about it is it was Koepka, this all-conquering machine, playing with Mickelson. So it was real match play Koepka would do something, Phil would respond, and there was a body language aspect, and they were looking at each other, and so it really was 4 hours of tension.
It was, yeah. You didn't want to leave the room for too long, and I normally would press pause on a major championships so then I can fast forward through some of the ads, but I didn't even want to do that in case I just missed something that had happened live. And it's one of those things that when you're watching it, you do get the feeling, I'll never see this again. I'll never see a 50-year-old do what he's doing right now, so you better soak it up and enjoy it, because it's probably a once-off. And
his game has been in the toilet, I mean, effectively either side of that all year. I mean, this always adds a kind of magical quality to what happened. I'm with you there. That'd be in my top 3 for sure. That'd be my top 3. So you've kicked out Rachel Blackmore. She's gone. And Phil Mickelson's in. There's some highlights from the year that was. Kieran Cunningham, I knew without question before I even got the word from JP outside what your lowlight of 2021 would be, and you didn't disappoint me. And I think it's a worthy thing to pick. It's an important thing to pick.
Yes, Daniel Kinnan's continued involvement in professional boxing, and I think it might become clear in time that 2021 was a year when he actually cemented his hold on it, that his grip actually got even tighter in the sport. And I go back to the Panorama programme on BBC, which was, I think it was the 30th of January, just at the end of January, and the reaction within boxing to it. And the reaction within boxing, I may be wrong, but I don't remember reading anything online from the boxers or trainers, etc., or managers who tweeted about it, or the initial reaction. I didn't see anyone praise Panorama or the reporter Dara McIntyre. I saw a lot of people put the boot into Barry McGuigan, who took part in the programme and have been critical of Daniel Kinnan. And the inclination was to shoot the messenger, throwing in another cliche, to circle the wagons. And I think a lot of people within boxing have enabled Daniel Kinnan and have to look at themselves in the mirror, but I don't think they have any willingness to do so. And that goes for a lot of the boxing media too, that have asked no questions of people who are deeply involved with this guy. And it's a sport I've loved for a long, long time, and it's really soured me on it, the way the sport has embraced this guy.
Hard to argue with any of that. Dave McIntyre, your low light from 2021.
Mine was the takeover of Newcastle United. I just felt depressed in the build-up to it, knowing the news was going to be confirmed. There was parts of the aftermath as well that just left me cold. Football is in a bad place in a lot of ways when it comes to the calibre of persons and companies and states that are now buying football clubs across the world, but particularly the big clubs in Europe. And it left me wondering. I mean, I followed a club from when I was 6 years old. I followed the same club my father followed, and I could understand the relief of the Newcastle fans who have had to be put through those years under Mike Ashley when they knew their club was going absolutely nowhere, a club that haven't won anything since the 1960s, and I've suffered an awful lot of agony in the meantime. And I try to put myself on their shoes. How would I feel if the club I loved and had supported since I was a boy, and I shared all the highlights and lowlights with my father, were taken over by a group representing the Saudi government? And it was very difficult for me to be overly critical of the supporters and, cheering the streets. They got rid of Mike Ashley, but at the same time, when an owner comes in with the history that they have when it comes to human rights, and it's beyond doubt, like there is no real debate over some of the stuff that has gone on, it just left me really depressed about where football has gone. And you could even make an argument about several other clubs in Europe, I know, and there's an awful lot of whataboutery when it comes to this sort of thing, and I get all of that. But at the same time, I don't think anybody really outside of Newcastle fans could have, been overly happy by the developments around that ownership and that buyout.
It's an interesting turnaround as well for a lot of us who remember our football from the 90s, because there's definitely a residual fondness for Newcastle and the fans.
Yeah, totally. It's for a while there were a lot of people's second favourite club. I mean, that Keegan side, obviously, and Peter Beardsley in the twilight of his career and the brilliance of that, and Ginola and Spria and Shearer and Ferdinand and some of the wingers they had. And it was a fantastic time to be a Newcastle fan, although they obviously didn't win anything. But it's very difficult to see where it's going to go in a positive sense unless you're a Newcastle supporter and they have all this money and they spend it well and they start to win big trophies.
Yeah, I think they're about 14 times richer than Man City's owners. Kieran, did that one bother you? Because I know plenty of people at this stage are saying, well, look, what's another oil state, what's another human rights issue. Like, I mean, football's long jumped the fence on that front.
Yeah, no, it definitely did bother me, though. No, that's, because across the board, Saudi Arabia in many ways is a rogue state, and it's a seriously malign influence on sport. Like the last 3 Formula One Grand Prix were Qatar, Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia buying, Newcastle United. Saudi Arabia with, the bids to host Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, with the help of Daniel Kinahan.
They're trying to also golf takeover as well.
Trying to golf takeover, and also they were the first. They are the country who pushed for the biennial World Cup first. And Gianni Infantino, the FIFA president, is very close to Saudi Arabia. So I think it's a state that's a malign influence in sport. I hope Newcastle United are relegated. I have a lot of sympathy for the supporters. They've been there a long time. But I would hate to see that club get successful with those kind of owners.
Okay. Kieran Cunningham of the Irish Daily Star. Number 3, the All-Ireland Football Semi-Finals. Number 2, the wonder of Mo Salah. Number 1, the Irish hockey team before the anthem with a sense of Hakuna Matata at the Olympics. Low light, Daniel Kinahan's continued influence in boxing. Dave McIntyre, number 3, Meath ladies upsetting the odds. Number 2, last 5 minutes of the Formula 1 season. Rachel Hu, he says, even though an hour ago it was a highlight. And Phil Mickelson, in you come, PGA win at 50. And your low light, the Saudi takeover of Newcastle. Dave McIntyre, Kieran Cunningham, here's to 2022. Thanks so much, fellas. Appreciate it.
Thanks, lads. Take care. Happy Christmas.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.